The story begins with our protagonist questioning himself how he died. The last thing he remembers is that he was alone in his room, a room with a magnificent royal bed raised above the floor, side tables, and a sword placed near the rack. He looks at the city from above after sliding the curtain from the window, his hand pressed against the glass. After that, his body felt heavy as he lay down on the bed, pulling the comforter over himself. Sunlight is peeking through the windows. Lying on the bed, he questions himself. Was he poisoned? Was he assassinated? He commands himself to think. His name is Gray. There were too many who wanted him dead. A beautiful but strong dagger is placed beside the bed. A royal sword and an elegant gold crown with sharp carvings are enclosed in the glass rack on the side table. After all, he was a king. As much as he wants to figure out his death, he cannot do anything about it anymore. There is no choice left but to go along with it. He hopes there is no choir of winged babies singing at the end. A flash of waves crosses his mind, reminding him of past events. Someone offers congratulations, addressing Sir and Madame, and announces that he is a healthy boy. His mother asks if she just gave birth. She tells him to hold him a bit further away, dear, because she cannot see. Does that mean the light at the end of the tunnel is the light coming through a woman's? No, that is not important. She says he is beautiful. A man compliments the boy, saying he has hair just like hers. Both are looking at him with love. Wherever he is, he can understand the language. That is a good sign. A bright and gentle smile full of a mother's love shines on her face. He cannot help but think to himself, how beautiful, how charming his mother is. Tears of happiness roll down her cheeks. She says he has his eyes honey. With a strong jaw and fiercely sharp brows, she is sure that this man is strict and serious. His father calls out joyfully to his son, "Hi little Art Hirty, can he say dada?" His mother gently reminds him that Trey he was just born. His father giggles in confusion. Never mind, his surroundings seem normal enough. A candle on the stand at the corner wall is glittering. Safety armor including a cap body cover, an arm shield, is hanging on the side wall. His mother holds the baby in her lap while he looks at the ambience with his beautiful blue eyes. He questions himself, where is he? The house is in the middle of a plain field. The thatched roof has a chimney exhaust on the side. A cool breeze is blowing, making the fresh leaves fall, and a window of the house is slightly open to enjoy the wind. Weeks slowly trickle by. Although his mother, Alice, is a gentle and kind-hearted person, she holds the reins tightly in the family. His mother pats him gently while his father shows his love and concern. His father, Reynolds, is a dependable and charismatic man if his occasional childishness is ignored. While he is thankful to be born into a loving family, his life is filled with difficulties that he would not wish even upon his enemies. With little control over his limbs and unable to manage the bodily functions that come with the prison of flesh, he lies on the bed and defecates, prompting his mother to come and change his diaper. Perhaps years of mental fortitude honed as a king, a representative of his country, and the ever-faint hope that this is all a dream, are the only things keeping him sane. In the morning, his mother carries him in a backpack to the market. It seems that he has been transported to the past, into a much more archaic period. A soldier is having a casual chat with the shopkeeper while purchasing something. Looking at the long sword of the soldier, he wonders if people usually carried weapons in the past. He assumes that the vials of suspicious-looking liquids, passed off as medicine, are being sold legally. Another child with his mother is at a fruit stall, while two men are having a secret discussion, speaking ear to ear, and another man is purchasing elixir. The shopkeeper markets the elixir, saying it is great for endurance and costs just 2 coppers. His mother thinks that her little Art must be tired. She suggests they head back home. She will take 3 elixirs for her husband. The child is lying on the bed, deep in thought. Knowledge is strength. He has assessed his surroundings over the past weeks and is confident that he has a firm grasp of what to expect. His father lifts him from the bed and into the air. He greets the child, saying, "Daddy is home. How is his little man doing?" All of a sudden, he throws the baby into the air. Watching this, his mother panics and rushes toward her husband, asking what he is going to do if he drops him. His father catches him back. As expected of such a fragile body, he chuckles, thinking how strange it is to be reduced to this state by a mere toss. Laughing, he remembers that his own father did this when he was younger. Ray tells her to look, dear. He thinks their little boy is having fun. Holding the baby tightly, he swirls him around. His mother, once again, calls out to her husband in frustration. Suddenly, the boy's knee hits the wall. He begins weeping loudly with tears continuously rolling down his cheeks. His mother treats the wound with magical powers. After spiritual healing, the boy is alright. His mother holds him in her arms and says that everything is all better. He thinks he spoke too soon. Perhaps he knows nothing of this world after all. In his previous life, he was a king. Standing at the top of the fort with his queen and commander, he led his army. He commanded troops, fought in battlefields with vigor, and claimed victory over his enemies. He out-dueled representatives from countries across the world. His sharp, shining sword brought rivals to their knees. Yet, out of all his accomplishments, he has never been as proud as he is in this moment. After mastering foot movements, he can now crawl a baby. His parents are amazed to see him crawling with intensity. His mother tells Ray to make sure he doesn't hit his head on the corner. Ray assures her and asks his mother to block him from getting near the shelf. crawling at a fast pace. He unfortunately bumps into the edge of the dressing mirror. The boy is surprised to see himself in the mirror. Since birth, he has been observing his surroundings with curious eyes. This is the first time he has seen a mirror. His parents shriek with joy upon seeing Art looking at his own reflection. Months have passed, and he is still not used to his new name. As a former king, Art sounds a little too cute for his taste. Astonished, he touches the mirror and watches his own reflection. Looking at himself now, he has to admit he is absolutely adorable. He chuckles to himself, thinking he is rather handsome. Watch out, future ladies, prepare to be heartbroken. His parents are delighted to see their son playing in front of the mirror. His mother kisses him after he falls asleep in the cot. She wishes him sweet dreams and leaves the room. As soon as his mother leaves, he blinks his eyes to initiate a mission. He throws the blanket out of the cradle and scoots to the edge, aiming to jump down onto the blanket. Now that Alice believes he has fallen asleep, he is ready, eyes glittering for a secret operation. He has approximately an hour before she returns to check on him. His mother is busy washing dishes while he manages to escape quietly by crawling. He is determined. The destination is within reach, full speed ahead. After peeking through the door, he successfully enters a room. It is a small space that has been converted into a study. A lantern is burning. Some books rest on the shelves while others lie scattered on the floor. Upon reaching the room, he silently celebrates his success. Ever since discovering this place, he has been sneaking in every night to learn more about this world. There is a secret map of kingdoms. Dicathan, the continent he finds himself in, comprises 3 major kingdoms: Eleanor, the elven kingdom deep in the forest with its misty woods and wolves on the prowl; Darv, the vast underground kingdom, home of the dwarves; and Sapin, the human kingdom, the most populated region. Both this world and his previous one follow a monarch system. However, rulership here is inherited, not earned. While trying to reach a book on the top shelf, he falls down with the book landing beside him. He realized early on that this world is vastly underdeveloped compared to his old one. The reason for the lack of technological advancement, he discovered, is magic. The candle's flickering flame reveals a book titled Beginner's Guide for the Privileged Mage. Opening the book, he finds himself at the page where he had left off before. In his old world, they had a life force called Ki, used by practitioners to enhance their bodies and weapons through intense training. This world has a similar force, mana. But unlike Ki, which existed only within a person, mana is present all around them. As he reads the mysterious facts, he begins scratching his back. The irritation is from a diaper rash. Anyway, mana can be used in various ways. The 2 most common methods are augmenting and conjuring. Augmenters use mana to enhance their bodies, granting them great strength, defense, and agility. However, their weakness lies in their limited range. Conjurers, on the other hand, emit mana externally, allowing them to manipulate the environment. But they must supplement their mana core with ambient mana to form spells. His mother is what they call a deviant, more specifically, an emitter who healed him when he injured his knee. Deviants are a rare type of mage capable of casting unique restorative magic. He continues reading with full concentration. According to the book, a mage's first awakening occurs between early adolescence and the late teenage years when their mana core manifests. The mana core sounds eerily to the Ki similar in his previous life. To form a Ki center, children were taught to meditate and sense the scattered fragments of Ki within their bodies, gathering them into one place. He wonders. He places the fingers of his hand together, and a shining ball begins to form. It's working. Suddenly, his mother appears and picks him up. She laughs upon finding him and says she was worried. Looking at him, she asks if he's having trouble going poopy. He thinks to himself that he is on the verge of beginning his journey to become the greatest mage in the world. Do not reduce him to a constipated infant. She guesses he didn't have trouble at all. It's time to change his diaper because he has defecated. As it turns out, amidst all his deep concentration, he had indeed soiled his diaper. Some of the books on the lower shelves are scattered. His mother sits on a chair to write a few words in her notebook. She opens the book, dips a pen into ink, and begins to write. It has been a little over 2 years now, yet it still feels like she learns something new about her baby with each passing day. She has come to the conclusion that Arthur must be the most adorable baby in the world. She picks him up, and he giggles. With his little patch of auburn hair and azure eyes that gaze at her with surprising intelligence, she knows he will get into trouble in the future if she does not become a strict and dependable mother. She cannot rely on Ray. She was carrying clothes out for washing when she caught Ray trying to teach Art how to fight. Art was holding a stick. Seeing this, she lost her temper and rushed over to scold both father and son. As she notes down her thoughts, her pen runs out of ink and begins to scratch the paper. And this was when Arthur could barely crawl. She had taken him to the market in a backpack carrier, where he tried to grab something. One thing she has observed is that Arthur absolutely loves visiting the small merchant strip in central Ashbur. So instead of shopping for groceries once or twice a week, they now go downtown almost every other day. He once tried to grab some shining stones, likely diamonds. He was amazed to see a man holding a magical curved wooden stick with light glittering from his hands. She insists she is not spoiling him. A man kneeling on one knee seemed to be trying to stop something. Her goal is simply to have fresh food in the house for educational purposes. Watching Arthur grow up so quickly, she wonders what he will be like when he is older. She continues writing down her thoughts. With Ray as his father, she has no doubt he will take an interest in becoming an adventurer. She often sees places where soldiers are having casual conversations. Still, she cannot help but worry. She can only hope that he fares better than the naive young teens who dream of becoming great adventurers. If only she could do something about his constant habit of sneaking into the study room. She is tempted to move his crib into the study itself, but that decision is for another day. She closes the notebook, places the ink pen back into the pot, and walks away. Arthur climbs onto a stool to sneak a look through the window. Looking outside, he spots a muscular man performing exercises. About 2 years have passed since his first difficult journey to the study. He has learned a great deal since then, but the experience of learning new things every day remains fascinating. He has been chanting something for several minutes now, focusing with all his might. Stones begin to rise into the air. He wonders what kind of magical phenomenon he will witness. Arthur is amazed as the stones lift steadily, powered by the man's concentration. Ray lifted the stones with his concentration and hurled all of them away in a single blow. Arthur was observing everything from the window. Ray, overjoyed, exclaimed that his daddy was awesome. Arthur thought to himself, was that it? 3 minutes of intense concentration just to fling something he could physically throw with less effort. His mother came over and patted him gently, asking if he was watching his daddy. Looking outside, she frowned and muttered that Ray had ruined the front yard again. Ray picked up his gloves and slid them onto his hands. Arthur had learned early on that his father was an augmenter. He wondered what path he would follow once his own mana core awakened. Ray began another drill, this time using his feet to enhance his movements as he sent more objects flying. Little Arthur and his mother continued to observe from the window. When Arthur turned back around, he was startled by how high up he was standing. Perplexed and unsteady, he began to climb down with trembling legs. His mother noticed, saying his eyes were half closed. She lifted him into her lap, kissed him, and said that someone clearly needed a nap. As they passed by the study room, Arthur pointed and said, "Mama, there are books." She replied that he knew it was nap time and he could read after resting. Arthur looked disappointed. He then pushed against her and pleaded for the books. Agitated but giving in, she allowed him to play in the study for a little while. She regretted not being a more firm mother. Boys his age needed lots of play, and she had made sure the room was baby-proofed. Arthur, however, didn't see this as demeaning. A great warrior, after all, must use every tool in his arsenal. Once inside the study, he immediately began reading. His mother watched him fondly, touched by how adorable he looked. Suddenly she remembered Ray, still exercising outside. Muttering that he had better not have knocked down another tree, she stepped away, saying she'd be right back. Arthur glanced after her. His greatest achievement, aside from the knowledge he had accumulated about this world, was his progress in forming his mana core. With an open book before him and his hands pressed together, he began to meditate. A faint, divine circle started to grow beneath him. He had spent the last 2 years gathering tens of thousands of tiny fragments of mana within his body, concentrating them near his solar plexus. He now understood why it usually took until adolescence to form naturally. The fragments moved incredibly slowly toward the center of the body. It was a grueling process, taxing both body and mind. Beads of sweat formed and began to roll down his cheek. But these 2 years had not gone to waste. He was almost there. Meanwhile, his mother carried a drink out to Ray, who was in the garden breaking apart another tree. High above, eagles glided across the sky. Then, just as Arthur brought the last piece of mana into place, there was a sudden blast. His mother was thrown to the ground. Ray immediately rushed to her, shielding her from the explosion with his body as best as he could. After hearing the blast, Ray rushed to save his wife. He shielded her by grabbing her in his arms. During this instance, many small fragments of bricks, stones, and wood hit his back. His shirt was torn, and he received many wounds on his body. He asked his wife if he was okay. But instead of responding about his condition, she asked about her son Art. She shrieked that Arthur was still in there. Upon hearing this, Ray moved with wind-like speed, dashing into the blast area where he moved the remnants away using his muscular strength. After removing stones and a wooden log, he was surprised to see something and kneeled down in love, starting to laugh. She asked what was wrong with Reynolds. She thought he had to be kidding her. She was worried and said Arthur was not even there. But he already was. Arthur was still in meditation. He felt glad and thought that he felt great. So this is what it feels like to have a mana core. Coming out of there, he gladly thought that even the trees looked greener. With his eyes wide open, he observed the surroundings, and it was unbelievable. He said to himself to wait a minute, what the hell was going on? He thought they had been attacked, judging by the havoc. Who dared to destroy the home of a king? He was reading a book while lying on the bed. Over the past year, along with his mother teaching him how to read and write, he had been learning the basics of mana manipulation and augmentation. His father tried to explain these concepts pictorially. At first, since his body was too small for sparring, they did basic body workouts. He got tense during running with his father. Ray used to assist him in doing various workouts. He tried a headstand after observing Ray. It was not too long ago when his father finally decided he would be okay to practice with the wooden sword he had given him for his 3rd birthday. The sword had a firm grip wrapped in cotton cloth so his hand would not slip during practice. While he was reading a book, his father appeared and said it was time to train Champ. He had his sword and told him to come on. He took him to the ground and reminded him to recall what he had taught him. He told him to match the flow of mana with his breathing. Just like his heart or lungs, his core was just another organ. Little Arthur wondered if most 4-year-olds would understand these abstract instructions. He showed a fascinating move and, with a single strike, knocked down the stick that his father was holding. His father encouraged him, saying he thought Arthur could do it. Hearing this, Arthur got angry. He said his father was not going to let him rest until he succeeded. He only had a little bit of time left to study before dinner. His eyes sparkled in anger. With a single strike, he smashed his father's stick, which fascinated Ray. Then he asked if he could go study now. Ray allowed him. He sat on the bed for meditation. In this world, strength is measured by the color of one's mana core. The mana core starts off black due to the body's blood and other impurities mixing with the mana particles forming the mana core. The mana core becomes more pure as the impurities are filtered out over time. The order goes as follows: black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and white. Each stage is split into 3 shades. Number 1 is dark, second is solid, and third is light. The lighter the mana core, the purer it is and the more power it holds. Someone called him, saying, "Arthur, it was time for dinner." This diverted his attention and made him angry, and he cursed. The plate was ready, and along with a glass of water, it was lying on the dining table. Father and mother were busy finishing their portion. Arthur was making a bite furiously, thinking if a baby could not get some alone time around here, how else was he supposed to learn? Ray got a headache. He told his wife he thought it was time they got Art a proper mentor. Mother took a stand against Ray's decision to place Arthur under the supervision of a mentor. She said angrily that he was only 4 Reynolds. Besides, he had said he would be the one to teach him. Ray defended his stance by saying that exactly, but he never expected their son to be such a prodigy in mana manipulation at just 4 years old. He felt he was holding him back. Arthur had so much potential. Both had a strong argument. She emphasized that she was not going to let her child leave home to go to some city hundreds of miles away. Ray argued that Cyrus was not just some city, and he would make sure his friend took care of him. Arthur let out a deep sigh. Their argument was happening so fast that they couldn't understand each other. Ray pointed to Arthur and brought him into the discussion. He said that Art had a say in this too. Did he want to go to a big city and have a real teacher? He got confused and started thinking if he was really being allowed to decide. Wasn't this a bit too much to ask of a 4-year-old? He asked if Mommy and Daddy could come too and meet the teacher together. Ray and his wife looked at each other in a state of confusion. Meanwhile, Arthur kept wondering if he had said something wrong. Was his sentence too complicated? Both of them chuckled loudly. Ray said he guessed they really hadn't thought about all of them going together. She said she might feel better about the whole thing if she were there when he was tested and met his teacher. Ray excitedly hit the table, making the dinner plate splash into the air. He said that then it looked like they were all going to Cirrus City. And so, he was shocked to overhear his parents already preparing for the 3-week journey. He was reading a book while lying on the bed. He thought he had seen it here somewhere. Mother angrily took the book from him and told him to get to bed. They were heading out early tomorrow. He asked in disappointment if it was really tomorrow. So soon? Mother replied that she knew. Honey, she hated rushing like this too. But his mom and dad's old friends from the Twin Horns were going to Cyrus as well, so they were taking them along. His dad was with them right now. She kissed Arthur's forehead so he could sleep better. She said she better not catch him staying up reading again. He could bring some books for the trip tomorrow, so go to sleep. He said, "Okay, Mom, good night." Both exchanged well wishes. He knew the Twin Horns had been in the area for a while, even helping to rebuild their home when they had time. From what he heard, the party consisted of 2 conjurers and 3 augmenters. This would help with whatever trouble they might run into. He was finally moving on from this small, quiet town. It was time to see what the world truly had to offer. Early in the morning, they started their journey, carrying basic belongings. In the distance, they caught sight of their travel companions. Ray hugged his friend, thanking him again for taking them along on this trip. He said, "Fellas," he wanted them all to meet his son. He pointed at Arthur and asked him to introduce himself. Arthur bent down respectfully and said that his name was Arthur Leywin. He thanked them for coming with them to Cyrus. Ray's friend appreciated his attitude and manners. He jokingly asked Arthur if he was sure Ray was his dad. The man was Adam Cringe, an augmenter specializing in the spear. A lady squeezed Arthur against her chest. She said he was just too precious and that they should be thankful he looked more like his mom. The woman was Angela Rose, a conjurer with a specialty in wind magic. Arthur felt irritated and thought, what was going on? He couldn't breathe. A hand pulled him away from Angela. He said that Angela was hurting him. He was Durden Walker, a conjurer with a specialty in earth magic. Arthur felt happy after interacting with him. Jasmine Flamesworth, an augmenter with a specialty in dual daggers, said not to mind her. She just needed to get used to him. Another lady holding a bow and arrow welcomed him. She said it was nice to meet him. Her name was Helen Shard. She was an augmenter with a specialty in magic archery. Ray announced that now that everyone was acquainted, they should prepare to move on. Everyone began the struggle of loading luggage into the cart. Someone from the front asked if everyone was ready. Angela responded that they were all good. Both carts started moving. Arthur looked outside from the open space. And so, the journey began. While continuing their journey, everyone began to feel hungry. They made a short stop to cook something. Except for Arthur and his mother, everyone participated in hunting animals so they could prepare dinner. Arthur seemed disappointed. Helen asked how he was holding up. He replied he was tired. Upon hearing this, he nodded. She told him not to worry about it. It was his first time traveling like this. Arthur said he guessed so, in this life at least. She teased him, saying that his father had been bragging nearly the entire way that he was a genius mage. Had he really awakened a year ago? They both continued their conversation. Adam asked Reynolds if he needed to do a little stretching before going to sleep. He added that he had been sparring with his boy, and asked if he minded if he played around with art. Arthur, feeling irritated, thought angrily that Adam should stretch by himself. Ray reminded him to be careful, saying they had just barely moved from light strength and mana exercises into sparring. Adam picked Arthur up by the collar and took him away. Normal kids his age would barely be able to climb a flight of stairs, but apparently here no one thought fighting him was unusual. Both got into their positions for attacking. Adam asked Arthur if he knew how to reinforce his weapon, calling him boy genius. Adam then roared like a lion. Arthur grew nervous, realizing everyone was watching their exercise. He and Ray had a telepathic conversation where Arthur asked Ray to get him out of this mess, saying the redhead was out for blood. Ray encouraged him to go get him, but it didn't help much. Suddenly, Arthur assumed the stance of a warrior. He pounced at Adam with his sharpened sword, launching himself from the ground. He aimed to attack. Adam positioned himself to defend. The reverberation from the clash of their weapons caused Arthur to slip. He cursed himself, blaming his infantile body, but he still managed to attack with more force. For a few moments, both exchanged attacks and defenses in various positions. At that moment, Newton's third law of motion came to mind. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. At last, Arthur fell back. His mother became worried. And boy, did that opposite reaction hurt. Walker slapped Adam for hitting the kid too hard and grabbed him by the hair. Adam asked what kind of training Ray had put Arthur through to turn him into such a little monster. Ray chuckled and said he didn't teach him that. Arthur's mother healed him using magical healing powers. She chanted as she asked if this was what he had been studying. Arthur gained relief by explaining that he had learned it by watching his dad and reading some books. Everyone was astonished to hear that he had learned such things from books. Adam asked in disbelief, books? Still, he said he would teach Arthur some of those movement techniques of his. Arthur giggled and explained that he just had to cross his back leg over his lead leg, then kick off with mana while letting his body almost fall, and then sort of, well, something like that. Two of the warriors tried it and slipped, falling down. One of them even bumped into a tree. Several days had passed since they began their journey to Xyrus City. There was a beautiful waterfall cascading from the mountains. They made a short stop to freshen up. His mother began to give Arthur a bath. During this time, his birthday also passed. Jasmine gifted him a dagger for his birthday along with some lessons. Adam enjoyed diving into the water. Training with Adam, Helen, and his father continued and showed decent progress so far. Helen jumped from the top of the mountain, splashing water everywhere. A fish leapt out and hit Jasmine on the head. But to Arthur's surprise, Jasmine had already succeeded in learning a few techniques. Helen held Ray by locking his hands while Adam began fondling his chest with a soft, tiny bush. It still amazed him how quickly Jasmine was able to grasp his instructions, especially when learning feint step. After enjoying some amusement, they were ready to continue their journey. His mother told him to come on. They were leaving now. He stood up with renewed zeal and energy. The journey resumed, heading towards Xyrus City. Adam called out to Arthur and said he remembered his father getting them into all sorts of trouble. Jasmine leaned down from the roof of the cart and interrupted, saying she was pretty sure Ray wasn't the only one who caused trouble. Wasn't there a time when Adam accidentally set something off? Everyone started laughing. Adam asked what that was about, then dismissed it with a, "Never mind, just a little rodent." His mother coughed. Arthur became worried and asked her what had happened. She told him it was nothing, just tiredness from traveling. Arthur began reading a book he had brought from home. While reading, he became anxious, and someone beside him asked if he could teach her more. He was shocked after reading some of the words. Suddenly the cart was shaken, and everyone grew concerned. His mother asked what was going on. Jasmine announced that it was bandits and told everyone to prepare to engage. Angela got ready to use her wind magic. She stood up and drew her dagger, declaring, "Submit, O wind, and follow my will. Gather and protect." The wind began to blow at a fast pace. Sharp-pointed arrows were aimed at the cart. A huge clash and repulsion occurred, and a fight broke out. Every augmenter and conjurer engaged in the defense, each using their own magical powers. Arthur and his mother observed the entire scene from the cart. Arthur looked around anxiously, realizing they were completely surrounded. The attackers continuously aimed at the area around the carts. Then their leader appeared, muscular man holding a large, heavy axe. He praised his men, saying it was a pretty good catch. He ordered them to leave only the woman and the kid alive, and to try not to leave any scars. After all, damaged goods would only sell for less. It seems he has been living in a bubble for too long. The leader appeared with a grim smile. He almost forgot that every world has its own share of filth like him. He was stunned. Arthur pulled out his dagger. He seemed disappointed. His mother hugged him and said there was no need to worry. She was there. One of the enemies sharply aimed an arrow at the cart. Ray and his friend made a collaborative effort to gather and guard. Using magical powers, they established an earth wall around them for defense. 2 sharp arrows were about to reach the cart where Arthur and his mother were hiding. Angela diverted the arrows using magical wind power. Helen swiftly attacked the leader of the enemies. She jumped from above to strike one of them. Ray also attacked 2 of the enemies, and one of them tried to strike him with a sword. Helen provided cover and pierced an arrow through the chest of the enemy who was trying to strike with the sword. Adam also proved his talent for killing. He stabbed a muscular, gigantic enemy. The enemies were startled to see their skills. They had not imagined such prowess. Jasmine had barely escaped the whipping of a rope. He was a monster with eagle-like hands. He challenged Jasmine, telling her to stop struggling, saying he would train her so well she would be begging to stay with him in the end. She became furious but still managed to dodge his attacks. Arthur was observing the scene and thought she was at a disadvantage due to her opponent's range. But could he help? Being a fighter is one thing, but does he stand a chance against an adult augmenter with his current body? Ray received a heavy strike from an enemy that sent him flying to the side of the cart. Blood began to ooze from his mouth. His wife and Arthur became worried. The man who attacked Ray was the leader of the enemies. His wife, upon seeing Ray, started trembling in confusion. Arthur told his mother that she had to heal him quickly. Something was wrong with his mother because she could not heal. Arthur was worried, wondering why she wasn't healing his father. Ray tried to calm his sobbing wife by bragging that he was fine and his injuries were not life-threatening. She was unable to use her healing powers. He encouraged her, saying she didn't need to worry and should do her best. Ray asked Arthur to listen carefully. After his mother uses her healing spell, those bad men will go after her. He would be able to fend off the leader, but not if he had to protect them both. He ordered Arthur to take his mother back down the trail they came from and not to stop. Arthur asked Ray what he was talking about. He said he wasn't going to leave him. He could fight. He had seen him do it. Ray tapped his head and asked him to listen. Arthur Leywin, he knew he could fight. That was why he was entrusting his mother to him. He told him to protect her and protect the baby inside her. Arthur remembered the way his father was patting and tickling his mother. She said she was a little tired. She would be okay. His mother was pregnant. Ray placed his hand on Arthur's head, telling him that he had been planning to tell him when they got to Cyrus, but Arthur held his father's hand and promised that he would protect his mother. Ray told him to get ready. Ray said they had 4 mages on their side. Observing the healing process, the leader of the enemies became furious and told his subordinates that they had a healer and to not let her get away. Hearing this, Arthur rushed off holding his mother's hand. Arthur thought, "Don't down me, Dad." Adam appeared all of a sudden and provided cover for Arthur and his mother. He said he would hold the enemy down and told them to get out of there. Arthur repelled an arrow shot with a wooden dagger, which broke. Jasmine told him not to stop. They both rushed forward. Something was wrong. There were supposed to be 4 mages. He counted 3 but couldn't see the 4th one. The leader said to forget the plan, Damien, and not to let them live. Who was he talking to? An enemy created a magical swirling circle to finish off Arthur and his mother. Seeing this, Arthur rushed forward, but the issue was that even if he could use mana to dodge it, his mom wouldn't be fast enough to manage. He suddenly turned back. Sorry for the bruises, Mom. He pushed his mother back. He knew that if he couldn't make it, he wanted to take the mage down with him. He used magical power to pull, and the dagger inside the swirl moved back toward the enemy. Let's hope this mana string holds out. Arthur grabbed the mana string tightly, which prevented him from falling. When the enemy was holding onto the edge of the cliff, the stones cracked, and being unbalanced, he fell. Seeing this, his comrade used magical power to save him. Arthur was also falling. He thought it looked like everyone else would be fine. He had always wanted to be an older brother. He woke up rubbing his eyes. After stepping out, he opened the door. A servant holding something on a plate was standing in front of the door. He moved out of the room. The servants greeted him by saying, "Good morning, King Gray." He entered another hall where an old man with long hair and a beard was amazed to see him. King Gray was busy looking at pictures on the wall. One picture was titled "The Council 30xy." The council, those who actually governed the country, managed its politics and economy. Another picture was of King Gray, a duel winner in the country. In a world riddled with problems like decreasing birth rates and limited resources, wars had been replaced by duels and armies by kings. He was one of them. The old man thought, admiring his handiwork is he. While being part of the council is rewarding, he wouldn't lie and say he wasn't envious of the fame and glory these kings received upon their victories. The old man said anyway, to what does he owe the pleasure of this unexpected visit? King Gray took off a gold medal from his neck and placed it on the table. After placing the gold, left the hall, saying that he was retiring. Marlorn called out, "Gray, hold on. He had spent his whole life striving to be the strongest. He thought, and for what? Fame, glory. He was still an orphan, with everyone he cherished gone. Fire blazed in the wooden pieces. He would give up everything he had in that life for the chance to go back to Ashbur and see them all again. He remembered the previous time when they were all cherishing each other's company and having a chit-chat. After falling down, he wondered where he was. How was he still alive? Regaining full consciousness, he saw a corpse with a dagger stabbed in its leg. He stepped up to retch but only spit. Again he fell down, and after a few moments, he woke up sniffing a leaf that had fallen from a tree. Arthur caught sight of scattered sweets. He took one and drank water. He was too weak to stand. Arthur thanked whoever had left the meal. Birds were chirping and gliding in the air. After struggling so much, he managed to stand up. He turned back, got an idea, and pulled the dagger out of the corpse. He pulled it out with such force that he fell backward after taking it out. Looking at the sky and the dense, lush green trees, he thought that he had survived. But how long had it been? Arthur took a stick from a nearby tree. It didn't matter, was he move on? Arthur stumbled. Moving across the trees, Arthur heard a voice. Was he awake? Terrified, Arthur hid behind a tree. Peeking out, he saw that the corpse was still lying on the ground. At first he was scared, thinking the man on the ground had woken up and was speaking. But after getting a clear view of the corpse, he trembled. Arthur thought, don't tell him the corpse is speaking. Again, he heard a voice. Someone asked how his body was. He mustered up courage and quickly moved near the dead man. He thought to himself that he swears if it gets up he's gonna fight. Once again, he heard someone say not to worry. The corpse wouldn't be reanimating, if that's what he was afraid of. Arthur sighed in relief, but then quickly became alert again, thinking he shouldn't trust an unknown voice, no matter how silky smooth and dignified it sounded. Arthur pointed his dagger and asked who the speaker was. Was he the one who saved him? Luckily, it was just a small rabbit that managed to escape by jumping. Again, he heard a voice confirm his second question. As for the first, he would find out once he arrived at the speaker's dwelling. Arthur angrily replied that he sounded pretty confident he would even try to find him. The voice said that he was the only one who could get Arthur home from this place. That's right, home Ray Alice and the twin horns. His mother chuckled at the thought of her baby siblings. Arthur was walking away thinking, are they all right? Did they reach Shiras safely? He wondered if the voice belonged to that mysterious person. Maybe he could ask for directions so that he might honor them with his presence. Someone chuckled at this. The hidden speaker said Arthur caught on quickly. Arthur Leywin. Although it was a bit rude to refer to a lady as Mr. But his intent was clear, so yes, Arthur thought. Wait, how did she know his name? The speaker said she would show him. A heavy rock-like object fell to the ground. Arthur bent down due to its echo. He heard the voice advising him to depart immediately. It would be much safer to travel while it was still light out. As his body gradually recovered, leaving him with only a few H's by the afternoon, he couldn't help but think. He was standing on a large tree stem acting as a bridge over a cliff. What kind of magic had she used to save him from falling? How could she have even known they were falling? And why did she only save him? These questions ran through Arthur's mind. The more he tried to find answers, the more questions he ended up with. Arthur tried to climb over the stone, hoping it was what he thought it was. On the other side, he found a water reservoir. Excited, he took off his clothes and jumped in to bathe and relax. While washing his clothes, he heard the mysterious woman say how pleasantly carefree he was. Hearing this, he got embarrassed and covered his body. She told him not to worry, there wasn't much to see. These words hit him hard. Wearing his torn shirt in embarrassment, he heard her say that they were just words. Arthur, a king, must remain calm and unfazed. She apologized for startling him and told him not to pout. His body was just underdeveloped, that was all. He filled a container with water and ate something. Since he had fallen off the mountain toward the east, he guessed he must be near the elves' domain. Looking up, he realized there was no fog, the kind the forest of Usher was known for. His fears of traveling through the beast glades were eased by the fact that only small animals seemed to be present. Still, he was surprised he hadn't seen any mana beasts, considering how rich the area was with mana. It was unfortunate that he couldn't stay to absorb some of it, but he needed to hurry. Then he suddenly thought of his mother. He needed to get back to his parents. With his mother pregnant, the stress of believing he had died might even endanger the baby if they were still alive. He reached the other side. She said she was glad he made it there safely. He approached the mountain and held onto a thin stem. A bird was chirping. He asked if it was nice to meet him. She replied that as interesting as it would be. She wasn't a sentient cluster of rocks. He would find her within the crevice. Entering the cave, he saw a shining object and was amazed. He thought, Dad, Mom, he would be home soon. He was stepping up recklessly. She warned him to watch his step. The stone cracked beneath him, and he fell hard to the ground with great force. As he stood up, he thought to himself that a warning about dropping 2 stories would have been nice. Then he caught sight of a creature with blazing red eyes. Terrified, he asked, "What is that?" She responded, "We finally meet, child." He stood baffled, staring at her. She teased, "Bugs will fly into your mouth if you keep it open that wide." Her nails were sharp and pointed. Arthur quickly closed his mouth. She moved her finger in a gesture that resembled a handshake. She told him it would take some time for her to open a dimensional rift strong enough to send him home. Meanwhile, there were special plants that could nourish him until then. Around him were large, colorful, glowing plants. Arthur thanked her and moved toward the plants. He plucked a purple-colored fruit from a stem. It shimmered like a mirror. He could even see his reflection in it. The sight reminded him of his father and mother enjoying fruit together. As he was about to remove the fruit, she pointed out, "That one tastes better." He chose it instead. The fruit's juice splashed over his hands as he bit into it, and he savored its flavor. Arthur asked, "You said you were a lady, but is there a better way I can address you?" She replied, "My name is Sylvia. Do you mind if I ask a few questions?" He asked. "Go ahead, little one," she answered, "though I may not be able to answer everything." With his initial fear of Sylvia's appearance fading, he finally asked all the questions that had weighed on his mind since waking up after the fall. Where was this place? Why was she here all alone? Where did she come from? How did she get that wound? And why did she save him? Sylvia answered, "Your first question is an easy one. This place is a narrow zone between the Beast Glades and the forest of Elshire. No one knows about it because I've been warding off anyone who comes near, though that rarely happens anyway. You, Arthur, are the first to enter this domain." He chuckled. "You can call me Art. That's what my family calls me? It's short for Arthur." She nodded. "Very well, I'll call you Art. For your second question," she continued, "I'm here alone simply because I have no one left. I have many enemies who desperately want something I possess." She revealed her wound. "My last battle with them, before I managed to escape, left me with this injury. As for why I saved you, perhaps I was moved by your courage and sacrifice, or maybe I've just grown lonely. Even I don't fully understand it." Her voice softened with emotion. She apologized to Arthur. "But I'll excuse myself for the night. My wound is festering, and I need to be in good condition to work on the dimensional rift tomorrow." Arthur wished her a good night. As the fearsome figure, clad in dark armor, walked away, Arthur couldn't help but notice how lonely she seemed. Just before she left, she added, "Oh, I almost forgot. I can't see exactly where they've gone, but your family and friends are safe. Just in case you weren't sure." Arthur's heart filled with joy. Tears of happiness rolled down his cheeks. "Thank you, Sylvia," he whispered. Arthur jumped, trying to take the fruit. Sylvia assisted him by lifting him to the level where he could easily pick the fruit. Sylvia and he spent hours talking about all sorts of things when she was not preparing the portal. He enjoyed her company. Those hours turned into days, and those days into weeks as they spent every moment together, and Sylvia never spoke about her own life. He slowly began to understand what sort of person this mysterious being was. He sat atop a stone and began meditating. While establishing a connection with divine powers, he saw Sylvia picking up fruits. Sylvia was the living embodiment of the phrase, "Do not judge a book by its cover." Despite her trauma-inducing appearance, she was kind, gentle, patient, and warm. She asked Arthur if he had had a chance to eat yet. These fruits were particularly savory and rarely grew elsewhere. She gave him 2 pieces of fruit. She reminded him of his mother in that she was gentle and kind. He took 1 fruit, but his mother had firmly scolded him when he was wrong. He suddenly remembered something unpleasant. There was a time when he had expressed his animosity toward the bandits. They deserved worse deaths if any of them made it out alive. Arthur ground his teeth in anger. He thought he was going to hunt them down. Sylvia knocked him away with a flick of her finger. He rolled down to another place and asked what that was for. She told him that perhaps he was not wrong in thinking those bandits deserved death. She had chosen not to save the mage he fell with for the same reason. Arthur asked why she had then. She answered that letting his heart be clouded with hatred and vengeance like this would only harm himself. Instead, he should continue proudly with his life. With his gaze forward, he would come across misfortunes again, but he must not let grief and rage corrode his mind. He should learn from them and face the future with a smile. Sylvia held Arthur in her hand. Only then would he truly be victorious. She asked if she had flicked him too hard. Did it still hurt, Arthur? Being lectured on morals and by a figure that appeared to embody evil had oddly struck him deeply. She called him again and again. She asked why he was not eating the fruit. Was something wrong? He responded that he was fine. He began to eat. Liquid was oozing from her wound. He said that Sylvia, her wound looked like it was getting worse. She answered not to worry, little one. This wound festered from time to time. He asked if that was really the case. Also, she had been meaning to ask. It was her understanding that humans usually awakened around the age of 12 or 13. How had he already formed his mana core and become able to utilize mana more efficiently than many full-fledged mages? He bragged that his parents said he was a genius. She said that perhaps he would be able to learn it then. He asked what he was supposed to learn. She replied that it was to meditate and absorb mana while moving, and perhaps even while fighting if he was good enough. He asked in surprise how she was doing that. She said that humans had a very linear mindset when it came to mana. Just start with small, mindless movements and work his way up from there. Arthur closed his fist and demonstrated his powers. Easier said than done. Mana beasts learned to do this naturally, but since humans usually awakened much later, their bodies were not able to multitask in this way. Considering that this limitation did not apply to him, if he practiced hard enough, he should be able to succeed. He felt fully motivated and said he would do his best. Sylvia chuckled and said that he should. Arthur got ready to attack, but unfortunately, with a single strike, he fell down. Practicing this skill to its fullest essentially meant being able to fight proficiently while still maintaining a steady inward flow of mana. He practiced a lot until sweat rolled down his cheeks. His hand developed a strong grip. It could not be. He said that Sylvia, he had done it. His eyes remained fixed after watching something. He called her Sylvia. Arthur was amazed at the huge amount of blood coming from Sylvia's wound. He asked her what had happened. His soul got stuck in the thick mucus and blood. Sylvia was about to fall. He held her body and tried hard, but all in vain. She fell to the ground. He asked why her wound was getting worse so quickly. It couldn't be, but suddenly he remembered Sylvia crying in pain. He kneeled down in regret. It was getting worse because she was creating the portal. Her wound was getting worse. She did it all because of him. He cried out. Sylvia held him in her hand and calmed him down, saying it was okay, little one. He wept so deeply that his face was filled with tears. He asked, sobbing, how it could be fine when she was dying for him. He cried. He cried for longer than he cared to admit, and he cried for the first time like the child he was on the outside. She asked if he had calmed down a little. Art. They didn't have much time left together, and she would hate for it to be wasted with him blaming himself over this. He was still crying constantly. He asked how he could not blame himself. She was basically sacrificing herself so that he could meet his family. She told him that he was doing her a favor by allowing her to leave this Forsaken cave a bit faster. He called Sylvia. She said that her name really did not suit this form, did it? The upper layer of her skin started breaking off. Her outer core broke away, and a golden light emerged. She appeared like a beautiful flying horse. She had wings, a beautiful tail, horns, and a stunning white body. She asked if now she looked a bit more like a Sylvia. He was shocked to see this. He asked if Sylvia was a dragon. She replied that yes. She supposed she was what humans referred to as a dragon, but they had little time for idle chatter. Now that she was in this form, she had to use her original form to finish the portal. But now that her veil was gone, they would soon be coming. Saying this, she flew away. Arthur inquired who they were who was coming. Before flying off, she turned back and asked Arthur to listen carefully. There were a few things she had to say before they parted ways. She handed over an oval-shaped object. Arthur thought it wasn't heavy, yet he felt like he could barely hold on to it. She also gave him her feather and asked him to wrap it around the object to conceal its aura. He asked in confusion what it was. She said, and please bear with her for one more thing. She struck him. His hands turned red, and some writing appeared. She said that with this, everything would reveal itself when the time came. Arthur asked if her eyes were okay. She told him she would open the portal now. She didn't have time to make it go directly to his home, but he should arrive near the humans. He asked if just like that, he was leaving her. Stones were falling from the roof. He was protected from one stone as Sylvia provided him a shield. She heard a voice, someone calling her, saying Lady Sylvia, advising her to cease her stubbornness and hand it over. Submit now, and perhaps he might even heal her wound. Arthur moved Sylvia's feather aside out of curiosity to get a glimpse of the new person. He thought the person looked similar to Sylvia's previous form. She had already caused them quite a bit of trouble after hiding. Sylvia stepped aside and said she had a bit of a confession to make. Arthur, truth be told, she had intentionally prolonged the transportation spell so she could spend more time with him. He became emotional after seeing blood and fluid coming from her wound. She said she wouldn't ask him to forgive her, but she did have one more selfish request. Could he call her grandma just this once? Arthur held her wing tightly and begged her to just come with him. He didn't know what she had done, but everything was frozen now. They could leave together. Tears rolled down her eyes as she said he knew she couldn't. After saying farewell to Arthur, she flew away. He called her Sylvia, but she reminded him to call her grandma. She thanked her child. Arthur was sad because of Sylvia. She had left him and flown away. He was lying on the ground in disappointment. She was gone. He would never have the chance to see her again. He shouted so loudly that even the crows sitting at the top bark of a tree flew away. His voice was so horrendous and sorrowful that even the crows were unable to bear it. His mind swam with memories of the nearly 4 months he had spent with Sylvia. For a time that seemed both long and short, Sylvia had treated him like her own blood. She had taught him the things he had lacked since coming to this world. There was a strange sound like horses running. He stood up in confusion. It was Sylvia's voice testing the sound. She greeted Arthur. He asked in confusion if Sylvia was still here. She answered that this was Sylvia. If he was hearing this right now, it meant she had shown him what she actually was. He thought it was a message that Sylvia had managed to leave earlier when she had placed her mouth near his body. She said that as frustrating as it may seem, he was nowhere near ready for the whole truth. His body was that of a boy barely past 4, and while his mana core had already progressed to the dark red stage, he was not strong enough. As a small parting gift, she had infused her unique will onto him. His future development as a mage would depend on how well he could use her gift. He grabbed his shirt. He thought who asked for the gift. He would rather have her instead. She said that she could imagine what he might be feeling right now. Sorrow, anger, guilt. but he had a family to look out for and a purpose to fulfill in this life. Her only wish for him was to embrace the joys and innocence of childhood and to become a man of whom both his parents and she could be proud. Arthur bent down to pick up the oval-shaped object wrapped in Sylvia's feather. She said that when his Manicore passed the white stage, he would hear from her once more. At that time, she would explain everything. So until then, she bid him farewell, King Grey. Questions continued to pester him long after Sylvia's voice disappeared. He asked how long she had known his identity. How did she even know? One thing was clear though, if he focused only on training for the sake of revenge, this life would hardly be different from his last one. From now, he could only move forward. Looking at the surroundings, he thought about where he was. He continued to move forward and then, with fast speed, climbed up a tree. Even with mana, his vision was restricted, but one thing was clear. He was deep within the Elshire forest. Arthur jumped from one tree to another. Even just barely being able to use the mana rotation Sylvia had taught him, he was able to use magic for a lot longer. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how he had ended up here. Sylvia had said that he would arrive near other humans. No matter, he would just keep looking around. He was getting pretty good at this tree traveling business. He seemed like a monkey. That sounded like a human. He had a tail and kept jumping like a monkey. Then he caught sight of someone. He thought that hopefully they could take him with them. Then he jumped down step by step. He sneaked from the side of the tree bark. Soldiers were guarding and carrying a cart. Arthur tried to hear their gossip. One of them shut her up. The door opened and all of them came out. He was amazed to see them. One person was saying that they should get ready to go. They were only a few days away from leaving this damned forest. A man with a short beard was tying a rope around a girl's leg. He said that elf girls go for a lot, don't they? The boss seemed like a scoundrel. The boss responded that she was a child too, so a virgin at that. She would definitely fetch them a lot. He told him to shut up and put her back in the carriage already. They needed to move. Arthur scratched his hand in anger. Those were slave traders. He saw her. She was a beautiful girl with silver hair. One of them asked to hurry it up back there. He had no idea how those pigs managed to get their hands on forest hounds. But he knew that getting one of them would be his best bet out of this forest. 3 horned wolves were pulling the cart. As for those slave traders, well, with all the crap that had happened to him lately, it looked like he would finally be able to let off some steam. Despite his eagerness to get home, he still needed a plan. He managed to jump across each tree bark smoothly. Dealing with those slave traders first was the best course of action. He sat on the first top stem of a tree above the ground. But he did not strike immediately. Attacking all 4 of them head-on would be suicide even for him. So he followed, waited, and gathered strength to make his move when their guards were down. It was time. He picked a seed covered in a hard shell and struck one of the wolves. They told the wolves to shut up before they woke up everything in the forest. Arthur thought that without a weapon, he was forced to utilize a technique from his previous life. A technique he wasn't even sure would work in this world. He thought they should just chew each other's antlers if they were that bored. One of the slave traders was carrying a meal for the wolves. Arthur considered that time best and attacked him, taking his dagger. The boss asked why the hounds were quiet now and what was taking him so long to come back. Was he taking a piss or something pink? Arthur attacked him and cut his throat. Arthur thought that as expected, fighting was a lot harder and more tiring in this body. He needed to finish this quickly while the last 2 were still sleeping. They both woke up and started moving toward the carriage. A man with long hair asked why they were being so noisy. Where was he? Pincus. A bald man got something thrown at his head. Instantly, he took his sword. Arthur moved at a fast pace between his legs and cut them down. 3 were down now. He made Danton cautious by informing him that the brat was a mage. He was astonished that a kid was a mage. Danton dropped his sword and said that they didn't want to accidentally kill the golden egg that had just landed in front of them. He asked if they did. He might even fetch more than the little she-elf. Danton attacked and said not to die, kid. Both fought. Arthur threw a large stone at his face that bruised his cheek. He took the dagger from Arthur's hand using magical powers. Danton said he had some cute tricks. He threw the dagger and asked him to catch it. Arthur knew he was fast. Arthur got repelled by the thrust. He said to come here, his bag of gold. Danton grabbed one of his legs and held him upside down. He told him to give up. He couldn't do anything with his little body. Condensing mana like a blade seemed to behave similarly to wind magic in this world. If that was the case, then fire magic should work too. Arthur condensed and exploded. This burned Danton's hand that was holding Arthur's leg. Danton said that the kid was dead. He took his sword out to attack, saying he didn't care even if he had to sell Arthur's corpse. He was dead. Arthur cut his throat in a single strike. The bald man pleaded for mercy. He was sure the little girl had said the same thing. Arthur opened the door of the cart and asked her to come out because it was safe now. She could go back home now. Her hands, feet, and mouth were tied. A girl who was kidnapped asked Arthur what this was for. There are things here little kids are better off not seeing. But she is also little. Arthur asked her to let them go. She told him not to take the cloth off until she says so. She stepped forward, having little visibility from the cloth on her eyes. She told him they should be a good enough distance away. He removed the strap from her eyes. She could look now. She thanked Arthur for saving her from the slave trader. Arthur greeted her, saying it was nice meeting her, and turned back with the intention to take his own way. She grabbed his shirt in confusion. She actually wanted to tell him not to leave her. She was scared. How could he abandon such a cute little girl in the woods, the piece of trash? Arthur informed her confidently that he needed to get home too. Those bad guys would not chase her anymore. But she was reluctant to leave his shirt. Arthur understood her intention and moved her hand away. He asked if, besides, elves were generally safe in this forest anyway. She nodded. Beasts are only scared of adults. Her parents said that kids will get eaten by hounds or tree golems. Arthur was worried after hearing this. He sighed, asking if she at least knew how long it would take to get to where she lived from there. She said she didn't know. He became irritated. Arthur moved forward. She became worried, thinking he was going on his way. He told her just to stay there. He would go gather some supplies for them. Hopefully the trip would not be too long. The girl became happy. He salvaged what he could for the journey ahead. He sat down to prepare the backpack. Neither of them knew how long it would take, and he also had to think about the journey back. He placed a dagger in its cover with him as a precautionary measure in case anything unpleasant happened. He picked something up from the ground and thought it was a shame they couldn't take the carriage, but it might be for the best. They would stick out like sore thumbs riding in that. Arthur let the hounds free so they could enjoy. One of the hounds had blood oozing from its mouth. Arthur took a warm jacket and placed it over his body as his shirt was torn. He thought he could only hope the elves had something that could take him back to the human kingdom. Arthur reached the spot where he left her. She was still sitting in the same place, playing with a little butterfly. He was holding a beautiful attire. Arthur said he found those clothes inside the carriage and assumed they were hers. Wear the cloak over them since it would probably get cold. She gave a pleasing expression and thanked him. Arthur patted her head. Let them get her back home. As they walked in the vague direction she pointed to, he got to know more about the elf child. Both moved happily toward their destination. Arthur asked her name. She said her name was Tessie Aerolith. What was his name? They stopped for a while. Tessie drank water and Arthur ate something. He said his name was Arthur Leywin. Tessie asked how he had ended up in the Elshire forest. Arthur. It was a long story. They had time. A pack of wolves surrounded them. Arthur took out a dagger, pointed it at the wolf for defense, and held Tessia tightly. Let them just say he got separated from his family. Tessia said that meant he came from the human kingdom, right? A small butterfly, like living being, was sitting on her palm. She asked if it was true that all male humans were perverts and had more than one wife. Arthur asked what? Who told her that? She answered in an embarrassed way that it was her grandpa. Arthur asked if he was sure there weren't perverts among elves too. Wait, did she even know what pervert meant? Not really. He climbed up the tree. She answered his question, saying usually only some nobles preferred to have multiple wives. Now she got it. Arthur was questioning her continuously. He asked if she really did. Anyway, let him ask her a question. What was it like living in Eleanor? It was fun. She spent a lot of time with her caretakers and grandpa since her mom and dad were busy. Tessie saw a rabbit and started playing with them. Oh, once she awakened, she would probably be given a mentor to train under. She was pretty excited about that. The education system seemed a bit more indiscriminating in Illinois if everyone was assigned a private mentor upon awakening. Arthur lifted a rabbit by the ear and had a dagger in hand, probably gonna cook it for a meal. She asked, indiscriminating what? Nothing, he was just talking to himself. They both sat down, gathered wood, and placed a pot on the fire to roast meat. She called Arthur and asked what happened to those bad guys that took her. He replied that they ran into a rather unfortunate accident. Would they try to come find her again? He promised she would never see them again. Tessia thanked Arthur for everything. They were getting warmth from the burning wood. Arthur said she should get some sleep. She asked what about him. He would keep guard outside. Arthur sat on the stones and started to meditate. He wanted to use the time to figure out what the will Sylvia left him was. Tessie peeked out of the camp and asked if he was sure he didn't need some rest too. Grandpa said to never share a bed with a boy, but she wouldn't tell on him. He said it was okay. He wasn't that sleepy. She became disappointed. He saw. She just remembered that beasts would more likely appear if they noticed he was out here because they would see he was a kid. Therefore, she proposed that, for their safety, he should keep guard inside the tent. It was for their safety, not because she was scared. He came inside. He got it now. Sleep. Tessia pulled over the blanket and grabbed his shirt before sleeping. Tessia Aerolith, she had had it rough. Rest well. Rabbits came near the camp. They sniffed the fire and the human. Tessie had placed her head in Arthur's lap. They continued their journey, with unfamiliar surroundings and time quickly passing as the only indicator of their progress. Both moved across the forest confidently. After Tessia's initial desperation and fears had passed, it was obvious she had no idea how to interact with him. It was dusk when they were moving on a steep path. He would admit that worries about his family and impatience to get back home did not leave him in the best of moods. She was worried while Arthur was happy. Arthur was busy fixing the camp for their stay. While strengthening a rope, he grabbed his chest in pain. The pain was so severe that the axe fell from his hand. But what made the journey almost unbearable were the agonizing pains coming from his mana core that struck unpredictably. His face was covered with sweat. Teshi came and asked if everything was okay. He responded that he was fine. It was night and still he was facing high-frequency pain in his body. In the morning, they wound up and packed the luggage to continue their journey. Tessia seemed to be worried. Wolves followed them silently, waiting to attack until they found the perfect place at a suitable time. Arthur shielded their attack using mana powers. After that, he took cover under a tree and grabbed his body again, because this time the pain was coming more frequently. He thought to tell her. Instantly, he remembered that she would only worry. They spent one more night in the camp. Days passed and Tessia appeared to recognize more and more of their indistinguishable surroundings. However, their pace had slowed as Tessia's body could not keep up with the toll of constant travel. He snatched the luggage from her. They sat down for a while to rest. As for him, despite strengthening his body with mana, the pain continued to grow and it had become harder to hide it from the worried elf. He relaxed, thinking of poop. Tessia was troubled. They slept well. Arthur was asleep instead of guarding Tessia from hounds and wolves. In the morning when they were leaving, Tessia held his arm. She said she had been thinking since they had gotten to be close friends. Could she call him Art like how his family does? He said that he didn't mind. She was confused after hearing this. She asked if that was it. Arthur excitedly replied that he would be most honored that Tessia Aerolith may refer to this humble countryside boy by Art. She furiously replied that there he went, talking all weird again like some old man. Arthur mockingly responded that it was better than being a crybaby that couldn't even pee by herself without him nearby with his eyes closed and ears shut. She got extremely angry, opened his mouth wide by the sides of his cheeks, and ordered him to shut up. She thought she saw something. He also agreed that he saw something too. He saw moss and leaves and fog and trees, lots and lots of trees. Then both sat together to enjoy chit-chat. Still, it seemed that despite the mental age gap they had gotten closer. During the morning, Tessia tapped some trees. Arthur was shocked to see her. She said they were here. She was extremely cheerful. Upon tapping again, green light appeared and a cave opened. She entered that space and asked Arthur to come along with her. Tessie entered the space and asked Arthur to come along with her. Arthur fell to the ground in disappointment because he hated those teleportation gates. She poked him joyfully, telling him they had arrived. Arthur stood up to observe the place. Throughout the entire journey, it was the first time he had seen Tessia genuinely happy. He was stunned by the view before him. Massive fountains stood in the center of the passage, grand mansions were built all around, and flags were placed atop every building. People and guards moved about the area. The gazes of the people around them were strange and fixed on them. Pristine was the only word that came to his mind, and even that failed to do justice to the scene. In front of them, green magical light was swirling. Arthur thought it might be some sort of magical attack and grew furious, ready to draw his dagger. Tessie asked him to stop. A group of soldiers gathered to greet them. They bowed and welcomed back the royal princess. The words left Arthur with his mouth open in confusion. He stood frozen, pointing at the guards, stammering who, where, he or she. Tessia blushed in joyful embarrassment and nodded. One of the soldiers, still bent in respect, informed her that they had arrived as soon as they noticed the royal teleportation gate had been used. The king and queen were worried. A man and a woman in royal attire stepped out of a majestic carriage and rushed toward Tessia. The woman called out that her baby Tessia was okay. The man was Alduin Aerolith, king of Eleanor, and the woman was Muriel Aerolith, queen of Eleanor. An old man dressed in an elegant royal robe arrived with more soldiers. His name was Virion Aerolith, a name recorded in every history book. He was the former king of Eleanor, the one who led the last war against the humans of the Sapin kingdom. Tessie was happy to see all of them, while Arthur remained confused. Virion looked at them in good spirits. Arthur held Tessie in front of him and gently pushed her forward. Muriel bent down and hugged her. The former king savored the smoke from his cigar. The queen and king embraced Tessia together. Arthur's eyes welled up as he observed the reunion. He wondered if his own mother and father would react the same way upon seeing him. Alduin thanked him, not only as the king of Eleanor but also as the father of this little one. As a token of gratitude for helping Tessia return home safely, he asked Arthur to accompany them to their home. His tone was gentle, but his eyes made it clear that this was not a request. It was a command. Arthur bowed respectfully and said it was an honor. Tessia came to his side, radiant with joy, and held on to him. The queen was embarrassed, and the king, the former king, and the guards all watched with puzzled expressions. Tessia pulled him forward and asked him to come along. There was so much she wanted him to see. He had expected a magnificent castle after learning she was a princess, but what he saw surpassed all expectations. Gigantic castles towered over the land, illuminated with beautiful lighting. She kept pushing him forward along the pathway while he took in the atmosphere. He suddenly felt dizzy and paused, thinking to himself what kind of glitched novel he had ended up in. Queen Muriel ordered her handmaidens that the child was their guest and to get him washed and settled into a room to rest. Arthur thanked Queen Muriel but said he would like to explain what had happened first. The queen and king remained silent. The queen sat beside Tessia at the dining table. King Alduin and the former king were also seated. Muriel busied herself braiding Tessia's hair. Guards stood surrounding them. Arthur bowed to introduce himself. He said his name was Arthur Leywin, from a humble town in the kingdom of Sapin, and that it was an honor to be in the presence of the royal family. With eyes closed, he reflected that the introduction may have sounded over the top, but no meaningful conversation would happen if they continued to see him as a mere child. The king remarked that although Arthur claimed to come from humble origins, he seemed rather mature and well-educated. He said he would like to hear what had happened. Arthur began his recount with a vague explanation, stating he had been separated and then encountered bandits. It was not a lie, though not the full truth. As the story moved to the part where he had met their daughter, the mood in the room shifted. When Arthur mentioned the slave traders, King Alduin slammed his fist on the table in anger, blaming the humans. Arthur, speaking humbly, clarified that with all due respect, slave trading was a profession, not a race. King Alduin. The guards immediately drew their swords and pointed them at Arthur, but King Virion ordered them to stand down. Fury was visible in Virion's eyes. He asked Arthur whether he, a child, had watched the slave traders take his granddaughter and what he had done. Negotiated. Arthur replied that no, Elder Virion, while he was a child he was also a mage. He had eliminated the slave traders and rescued the princess. Another guard unsheathed a magical sword and accused Arthur of lying. King Virion turned his ferocious gaze toward the commander, who suddenly realized he had made a mistake. Arthur calmly stated that regardless of whether anyone believed him, Princess Tessia had been returned safely. All he wished for now was to return to his family in Sapin. Tessia stood up, confused, and asked if he was leaving already, calling him Art. King Alduin was baffled to hear her address him that way. Former King Virion appeared slightly suspicious. Arthur responded that, considering their history, he did not think it appropriate for a human to remain in this kingdom for too long, Princess. Besides, his priority was to ensure his family was safe and to let them know he was alright as well. King Alduin Erlith began to ponder that regardless of the troubled past between their two kingdoms, Arthur had saved their daughter and had taken the trouble to accompany her all the way back to them, which entitled him to a fitting reward. Tessia grew sad, and her mother comforted her gently. King Alduin informed Arthur that, unfortunately, the teleportation gate connected to the Sapin Kingdom was only accessible once every 7 years, during the summit conference held between the three races. It would be another 5 years until the gate would reopen. Arthur was disappointed, but the very next moment he brightened up upon hearing that they would be happy to send a group of guards to escort him back home safely. King Alduin opened his arms wide as a gesture of welcome. He told Arthur that he would also like to extend their hospitality. Some among them were tolerant enough, but many still harbored grudges against humans because of the war long ago, so for now, Arthur should consider himself at home. They would have his escort ready by tomorrow morning. Arthur felt honored and expressed his gratitude. He went into the bathing area and was amazed by the sparkling, beautifully adorned spa. After undressing, he stepped into the shower, thinking that he was far too tired for anything else. As the water poured over him, he enjoyed the bath, but suddenly pain flared through his body, worsening with time. After finishing, he came out and sat down on the couch. He took out an oval-shaped object wrapped in a feather and stared at it. He did not know what to do, and wished Sylvia were there to help him. Someone knocked at the door, and Arthur assured them he was coming. When he opened it, he found Tessia standing there, visibly furious. She struck him in the stomach and pushed him backward. She was upset because, first, he had spoken so coldly to her family, and now he was planning to leave already. Arthur placed his hands on her shoulders to calm her and told her that he had not meant to be cold, only respectful. She knew they were the king and queen of the entire kingdom. He asked why she had not told him. She mocked him in a romantic way. Arthur grew frustrated and told her not to tease him. She burst into tears, crying that she still did not want him to leave. He was the first friend she had ever had. Arthur consoled her by wrapping an arm around her neck and called her a crybaby princess. He then asked her to show him around the castle. They stepped into a vast corridor where she said this was probably her favorite place in the entire castle. Splendid. Glittering flowers were planted along the grass. She said that if he stayed until spring, he could see all the flowers bloom. At least for now he could witness the glow bees harvesting. She picked one up and asked him to look at it, saying it was pretty, right? He was bewildered at the sight of it. She handed the glow bee over to Arthur. Suddenly, a sharp metallic object was hurled toward them. Arthur pulled Tessia down and caught the flying object with his hand. Filled with rage, he dashed forward and began fighting the attacker. In the midst of combat, he realized that it was former King Virion. Virion greeted Arthur, but Arthur remained furious and asked if he had just tried to kill his own granddaughter. Arthur held the object, which turned out to be a dagger. King Virion remarked that it might have left her a small welt, but doubted that the toy Arthur was holding could kill anyone. Upon examining the dagger, Arthur understood that he had been tricked. It was merely a toy or an artificial blade incapable of causing harm. King Virion pointed at him and commended his instincts, noting that Arthur had caught the little present and turned it against him. Though his mana usage was mediocre at best, it was now clear how he had managed to kill a few slave traders. Arthur, worried, thought that the old man might have lost a screw. Tessia pleaded with him to stop teasing Arthur, calling him grandpa. Virion questioned her teasing. She should know why he had come. It had been a long time since he had met someone interesting. He tossed a sword into the air and declared that they would now see what Arthur was made of, calling him Bart. King Virion swirled the sword skillfully in various directions before suddenly throwing it. Arthur managed to catch it mid-air and instinctively swung it toward King Virion's neck. Tessia, thinking her grandfather had been struck, shrieked in horror. But Virion evaded the attack with ease, chuckling and calling Arthur a scary little brat. Arthur, unsettled by the comment, grew more anxious and launched another strike, only for Virion to dodge effortlessly again. Arthur leaped forward with greater force, determined to land a hit, but all his attempts were in vain. King Virion countered with a powerful blow that sent Arthur flying. Even as Arthur tried to minimize movement and reinforce his strikes with mana, Virion blocked them effortlessly. Frustrated, Arthur couldn't keep up. In one swift motion, King Virion pushed Arthur back again, sending his sword flying. Just as it was about to fall, Arthur caught it mid-air and, with a sudden burst of speed, managed to scratch Virion's forehead slightly. Arthur collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. Tessia rushed over, shouting at them to stop. Embarrassed by the bruise on his forehead, Virion admitted, "It seems I deserve this for being arrogant." But to think he'd actually land a hit. Tessia glared at both of them and pinched her grandfather's skin. "I think you've bullied Art enough, Grandpa," she said firmly. "Oh, that hurts, little one," he shrieked in exaggerated pain. "You should have gone easier on him." "I'm afraid if I had," Virion replied, grinning, "might have been the one bullying me." Arthur laughed out loud. "I'm honored that the esteemed elder Virion thinks so highly of me." Virion narrowed his eyes. "Honored, is it?" he echoed with a strange tone. Arthur's smile faded. "What's with this sudden change in mood? If that's the case," King Virion continued, "become my disciple." Tessia's face turned pale from shock. Virion had already placed a bandage over his scratch using Tessia's personal first aid kit. "So," he asked Arthur, "do you accept?" Arthur replied in an annoyed tone, "You're actually serious? Why wouldn't I be?" "Well, for one, I'm a human. Is it even allowed for humans to stay in this kingdom?" "No one will dare try and remove you while you're under my tutelage," Virion assured. "You're already more talented than most children, and even many adults. But I can teach you things that even the most skilled mages in Sapin couldn't." Arthur crossed his arms. "Even if you say that, I can't. Not when I don't even know how my parents are doing. They don't even know whether I'm alive." Virion's tone softened. "What if there were a way to find out? To communicate with them and let them know you're safe? Wouldn't that be enough?" Arthur hesitated. "What do you mean? Wait here." Virion then turned to Tessia. "Go get washed up and into bed." He paused, his expression growing serious. "I realize I'm being impatient, but this has to do with what I sensed earlier during our little spar. You've been having bouts of searing pain in your mana core, haven't you? And they're becoming more frequent." Arthur's eyes widened. "How did you know that?" Virion spread his arms. "More important than how I knew is the fact that you don't know what's causing it. That's the real problem." He stepped closer. "Tell me, do you know what a beast will is?" Arthur shook his head. He'd never heard the term before, but his mind immediately flashed to Sylvia and the moment she had struck him at his core. He'd encountered mana beasts before, but not like that. "Mana beasts are ranked from Class D up to Class S," Virion explained, "but a beast powerful enough to be classified as Class A or higher gains the ability to pass on their will, an inherited ability, either to their offspring or to a person they are bound to." Arthur listened closely as Virion continued. "I won't ask how you came into possession of such a powerful beast will. But right now, that power is doing more harm than good. It's too strong for your immature body to handle." "Wait," Arthur said. "You know all this, do you have a beast will too?" Virion smiled. "I'm what's known as a beast tamer, a title earned only after fully conquering a beast will. And you can earn that title too, if you learn to control the one inside you." Arthur's throat went dry. "I understand how badly you want to return to your family," Virion continued. "But if you go now, it'll come at a grave cost. The power you've received is too potent. If it isn't properly controlled soon." A vision flashed in Arthur's mind, a jagged crack running down a monstrous beak. "That power will destroy your body from the inside out." Arthur was sleeping on the bed, his mind restless even in slumber as he wondered about the heavy sensation pressing down on his body. A demon was haunting him. He questioned whether this monster was the personification of his worries, his burdens, the expectations placed on him, now invading his dreams. Suddenly, Tessia jumped on him, cheerfully greeting him with a sing-song voice, telling him good morning and playfully calling him to wake up. Arthur, still deeply asleep, mumbled that "not now, shadow monster, just 5 more minutes." Tessia, now annoyed, demanded to know who he was calling a monster. She scoffed at his messy hair, mocking that he had no room to talk, calling him a mini Medusa. Then she asked if it was true they were going to stay here. Grandpa had apparently told her this morning that they were. Arthur, while buttoning his shirt, replied that maybe, but they would know for sure after the trip with Elder Virion, addressing her as Princess. Tessie immediately pinched him in frustration and shouted that she was not a princess and warned she would get angry if he kept calling her that. Arthur was momentarily confused, then tried to calm her down, telling her to let him shower and get ready. unless she wanted to watch, in which case he suggested she leave the room. Tessia gasped and called him perverted, muttering that Grandpa was right about him. Arthur grew irritated and told her to stop using words she barely understood. He stepped down the stairs and overheard a heated conversation. Someone was pleading, saying, "Please, Father. He knows it is not appropriate for a human to be residing within this kingdom." The queen agreed and told Elder Virion that Alduin was right. She expressed her gratitude to the boy for saving Tessia, but added that allowing a human to stay went against all their traditions. King Virion responded that he had taken a liking to the brat and that there was no need for further discussion. He noted that her daughter seemed to approve of his decisions as well. King Alduin implored his father to reconsider, but Virion replied coldly that the boy would be under his direct guidance and instructed that everyone in the kingdom be informed. Arthur thought that it looked like the elder really could be trusted. As he approached the royal carriage, Elder Virion called out that he was late and urged the little brat to hurry. Arthur and Tessia sat together inside the carriage while Virion occupied the opposite couch. Arthur leaned forward and asked how much longer they had left to travel, calling him Gramps. Elder Virion looked at him, puzzled, and remarked how comfortable Arthur seemed to be with him now. Arthur grinned and said they would have to see how the day went with his mysterious friend. Tessie dozed off, her head resting softly on Arthur's shoulder. Virion, watching them, said that she had woken up very early that morning, pestering him about Arthur, asking if that was right. He gently patted her head, reflecting that being the only princess of the kingdom had caused her to grow up in a lonely environment. She had been hurt too many times by both adults and children pretending to be her friends, which led her to grow cold and distant, constantly building walls around herself. Yet, in the short time she had spent with Arthur, she had smiled and laughed more than she had in the past few years, and for that, he offered a heartfelt thank you. Arthur, however, was thoroughly confused. A sudden creaking sound signaled the carriage had stopped. Tessie stirred from her deep sleep, rubbing her eyes and asking if they had arrived. A servant opened the door of the royal carriage. As they stepped out together, Arthur noticed a quaint and quirky little door standing before them. He thought to himself that he wondered who this mysterious friend could be, someone important enough to make the former king travel all the way to such a remote area. Elder Virion approached the door and kicked it forcefully, calling out that they had arrived and demanding the old witch come out. Arthur stood perplexed while Tessie giggled at the scene. The door swung open and an elderly woman with long curly hair and a wrinkled face appeared. Her expression immediately conveyed a cranky temperament. She snapped that her ears still worked fine, calling him a grouch. King Virion pointed at her and introduced her to Arthur as Rinia Darkasan, an old friend and a very special deviant who could help him. Arthur respectfully bowed and greeted her as elderly Rinia. She briskly told them they did not have all day and ordered them to stop standing around outside and come in. Arthur considered that being a deviant meant she was like Tessia's mother, whose magic did not fall into the 4 basic elemental categories. Inside the house, a large number of books covered the table, and Arthur wondered how exactly she would be able to help. Still confused, he politely asked her to forgive him if he sounded impatient, but explained that Gramps had said her magic could help him reach his parents. Rinia scoffed at the mention of Gramps and teased that she could see Virion had a soft spot for the boy. She explained that she was what was called a diviner. This kind of magic differed greatly from mage to mage, but she was quite capable. She added that there was very little someone could hide from her if she chose to look. For instance, she already knew Arthur was special. So special, in fact, that there were parts of his life even she could not see. Her eyes lit up with swirling colors, showing that these eyes had glimpsed both his past and his future. But that was not why he had come. He was not here for her clairvoyant powers. He was here to see his parents and to let them know he was alive. Arthur confirmed that was correct. Rinia smiled, holding a bowl of water in her hands. She instructed him to lean forward and keep his eyes fixed on the basin. She placed her hand gently on Arthur's head, channeling her magic, and told him to concentrate on the image of his parents, as clearly and in as much detail as possible. Once he could see them in the water, he would be able to speak with them. Arthur closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw his mother, her glowing auburn hair and sun-kissed complexion radiating gentle warmth. Her thin brows were always drawn together in worry over him. Then came the image of his father, with his strong blue gaze and goofy smile that had the power to brighten even the dullest days. His light-hearted jokes and simple nature at home stood in stark contrast to the charisma he displayed as a leader and a fighter. Arthur silently begged for them to be alive. He peeked with one eye, then opened both and stared into the basin, perplexed by what he saw. Alice cooked the food with great care and served that hot, boiling meal at the dining table. She asked everyone to dig in. Ray was amazed to see the meal and made a full spoon bite. He said that this beef stew looked amazing and asked Alice what the special occasion was. She became gloomy and replied in a low tone that there was nothing like that. It had just been a while since she had cooked for him after moving here. Ray gently helped Alice sit down on the chair. Her eyes filled with tears as she thought that this used to be Arthur's and his favorite dish. Ray, noticing the change in her, also felt grieved and asked softly what was wrong, addressing her as Honey. She replied that it was nothing and exhaled deeply, trying to release the stress or the kind of glitch in her heart. She touched her belly gently and then suddenly said, "Hi Mom, hi Dad." Ree froze in that moment just before taking another bite. They both looked at each other in confusion, their eyes wide with disbelief. It was him, their son, Arthur. The full spoonful fell from Ray's hand as they remained locked in a state of shock and wonder. The spoon hit the table and food scattered everywhere. They were probably really surprised that they were hearing his voice inside their heads. Arthur reassured them that he would explain everything later, but for now, he just wanted them to know that he was alive and safe. He told them he had barely managed to survive the fall off the cliff. Jasmine and the other fellows had held Alice up to support her emotionally when Arthur fell. Ray had killed that heinous enemy afterward. He had been overwhelmed with emotion at the time, and had wept out loud while Adam held him during that difficult moment. Arthur told them that this should be kept a secret, but currently he was staying in the kingdom of Eleanor with the elves. He knew it must have been incredibly hard for them. It had been just as hard for him too, but he was glad they were both okay. He hoped they did not blame each other for what had happened. After losing Arthur, Ray had been deeply disturbed. Still, Arthur said he was proud of what Ray did back then, and if he could go back in time he would do it again, even if it meant he would die. Ray had made huge efforts to calm Alice down after that painful incident. Arthur expressed that he wished he could come to them, but that might be a little difficult at the moment. It seemed he had a kind of illness that needed treatment. He assured them he was not in any danger, but he needed to be treated before he could head back home. He also wasn't sure when he would be able to reach out like this again. Meanwhile, Ray and Alice managed to reach another place. Arthur continued speaking to them in their minds. He mentioned there was a mage there who was a deviant like her, his mom. She was the one allowing them to hear his voice. Upon entering the building, Alice and Ree were welcomed in the best manner possible. Arthur then spoke to his dad, saying he would continue practicing magic and fighting while he recovered. He added that they should not be surprised if he could beat them in a match the next time they met. Until then, he told them to keep Mom and the baby safe. Alice and Ree were sitting on the couch, both crying and visibly worried. Arthur spoke again in their heads, telling them that he loved both of them. Ray stood up hurriedly, overcome with emotion, and Alice rushed toward him. Ray gently told her to slow down, addressing her sweetly. They hugged each other tightly, and tears of happiness rolled down their cheeks. Arthur told them to take care until he returned. As he watched their reflection in the water bowl, seeing his parents waiting for him desperately, tears also rolled down his cheeks and fell into the water bowl drop by drop. Arthur then looked at Virion and told him that he was ready. Arthur returned with elderly Virion to the kingdom from Rinia. King Alduin and the Queen were standing at the threshold just to welcome them. As Arthur stepped forward to enter the kingdom, King Alduin stopped him. The king said that it seemed years of ruling as a monarch had made him a bit old-fashioned and stubborn. The Queen gently tapped his shoulder and clarified that what he meant to say was that they were sorry for earlier. She asked Arthur to please accept their apology and consider this place his own. The king added that Arthur was his daughter's savior and his father's very first disciple, and it was only right that he welcomed Arthur once again, this time properly. Arthur felt a deep sense of happiness. The king leaned forward and extended his hand to shake Arthur's, and Arthur thanked him for his generosity. At that moment, Teshi appeared to defend Arthur. She stepped in front of him and asked the king to hold on. If he was truly sorry to Arthur, then he should let them go outside and play. She wanted to show Arthur around the city. Later, Arthur was sitting on the stairs when Teshi appeared once again and told him she was ready. She looked stunning in a beautiful dress and was wearing a mesmerizing pink hat adorned with a flower. She took him by the hand and guided him through the bustling city streets. While they were exploring, Arthur accidentally bumped into someone. The girl recoiled and exclaimed that it was Gross, claiming she had gotten human germs on her. She mocked that just because Elder Virion seemed to favor him a little, he thought he belonged here. Some other children gathered around. One of them told Arthur to go back to where he came from, calling him a monkey. Tessie became visibly furious and told Arthur to come on, suggesting they just leave. Arthur appeared a little disappointed. He thought to himself that this blatantly glitchy side character was the kind he kind of wanted to mess with. The boy, in a mocking tone, addressed Teshi as the princess and said that while he applauded her kindness, it was beneath her level to be spending time with a human commoner. He offered to escort the princess himself and introduced himself as Faerith Ivsar Tudu. Arthur gasped and repeated his name, surprised that it was the Faerith Ivisar. Teshi looked confused. Faerith boasted that of course Arthur had heard of him, given that he had awakened recently while still so young. He suddenly lost his temper and shouted, demanding to know what Arthur had just called him, correcting the pronunciation to Ivisair and calling him an ignorant fool. Arthur responded with mock seriousness, saying indeed ignorant. He bent forward slightly in a dramatic gesture and sarcastically said he had no idea he was in the presence of such an inspiring genius. He promised that this bug would remember to show proper respect. Teshi chuckled softly. Arthur added that now, if he would excuse them. Faerith called after them to stop, saying he suspected Arthur had not seen through his sarcasm. Arthur thought to himself that perhaps Ferrith was not quite as dense as he had assumed. Ferrith declared loudly that for the pride of the Uvsar house, he challenged Arthur to a duel. The small girls with him became nervous. Arthur was stunned and thought to himself what an absurd and strange situation this was. Teshi stepped in front of Arthur and questioned how Ferrith dared initiate a duel with the disciple of Elder Virion. She acknowledged that while he might be of noble blood, he should still know his place. Ferrith and his companions appeared embarrassed and apologized to the princess, but Ferrith insisted that his father had taught him never to let anyone trample on his pride. He pointed his stick at Arthur and called him human, demanding he accept the duel or retreat with his primate tail between his legs. He warned that Arthur's decision would also reflect upon his mentor. Arthur wondered whether duels were taken so seriously in this place. Ferrith interpreted his silence as acceptance and requested the princess, Tessia, to officiate the duel. Tessia raised her hand in the air and, with her eyes closed, solemnly declared that the duel would begin. People from the market began to gather, eager to watch the duel unfold. Ferrith jumped with joy and told Arthur to prepare himself, declaring that this genius would now demonstrate his power. Arthur leapt into the air with a determined expression, but he stumbled and, unable to maintain his balance, fell awkwardly. Arthur asked aloud if that was it. Tessia thought to herself that she had known this was going to happen. She grabbed Arthur's wrist and urged him to run. Arthur, even in the chaos, couldn't help but grow to appreciate this little princess more and more. Although the rest of the day did not out to be as enjoyable as wrestling with Ferrith, they eventually made their way to the library. The quiet atmosphere was refreshing and helped him take his mind off things. He sat down and began to read a book. Meanwhile, a vendor in the market cast a disapproving glance at Arthur. Tessia saw the look and approached with an angry expression, ready to protect Arthur. She asked him if his training was starting tomorrow and whether he was feeling nervous. Elderly Virion addressed Arthur, saying that he wasn't sure how Arthur had been taught so far, but he could assure him that his lessons would not be easy. He told him to never mind the pain from his mana core, explaining that the assimilation process used by beast tamers was often compared to submerging one's body in boiling tar. He reminded Arthur that he would be stuck here in a foreign land without the comfort of family and that even daily life would become arduous. He gently patted Arthur's head and added that if he could endure it, the payoff would be enormous. He asked Arthur whether he was up for the challenge, calling him brat. Arthur replied that he was excited. He said he had come a long way to get to where he was now and that he was looking forward to the training, to seeing his parents again, and to everything else that lay ahead. He could not wait to discover what the future had in store for him. Now it is a time 3 years later. Tessia and Arthur have both grown up. Tessia called Arthur and told him they were going to be. She grabbed his ankle, twisted it, and squeezed it back. He said to stop, that he gives. She had actually used mana to twist his ankle. Could she not find a gentler way to wake him up, Tessia? Tessia said it was not her fault he did not wake up when she asked nicely. Besides, he should feel grateful that such a pretty girl like her was waking him up. He mocked her by saying he found the maids here plenty pretty. Tessia asked if he had said something. She inquired whether he thought the maid just now was pretty. Arthur replied by telling her to get a rest. Elderly Virion asked in a stern way what took them so long. He was holding a stick. He asked that they be made ready for their lesson. There exist 4 basic elements in their higher forms. These higher elements, ice, gravity, lightning, and sound, can only be controlled by a mage who has gone beyond mastery of their foundational elements. They are called deviants. Dwarves can only manipulate earth and or fire, but like elves, they possess a much higher affinity to these 2 elements. Their distinct trait lies in the fact that all dwarves can mold and bend metal, while talented dwarves can control fire and earth to such a high degree that they are able to conjure and manipulate magma. Elves are limited to water, wind, and earth elements but with much higher affinity than humans. In rare cases, elves can also produce a special deviant type capable of controlling plants. However, elves are not able to produce mages that can manipulate the higher forms of water, wind, and earth. Human mages possess the ability to manipulate any of the 4 basic elements. They are also the only race capable of producing deviants in any of those elements, along with anomalies that cannot be categorized into any of the elements, like emitters and healers, for example. There exists a subtle power balance between the 3 races when taking into account population, overall inherent affinity to elements, and diversity in mages. Arthur asked whether that explanation was good enough. The elderly man stabbed his sword into the ground and, after ruminating, said that it was passable. Tessia got tired and lay down on the ground. Tessia asked a question. She knew that this whole assimilation process thing was meant to get Arthur's body ready to handle his beast will, but would it not be better to have him train his body physically while using magic, like she did? Arthur thought that he had been doing so all along from his lessons beforehand, but the difference in races had really shown over these 3 years. While humans were considered talented if they awakened in their late preteen years, it was not surprising for elven children to awaken as early as 10. For Tessia it had happened even earlier at the tender age of 9. Virion asked why she was angry that she was the only one getting beat up while training. Since then, she had been training her conjuring skills with a tutor while learning to fight from her grandfather. She sat down with a wound on her hand and said that Grandpa needed to go easier. Looking at Tessia, Arthur thought that she was going to be quite the monster in the future, though he should not be the one to talk. Grandpa said that what Arthur had been doing these 3 years was basically fusing his bones, muscles, and organs with his mana. He had not been physically training like her, little one, but he assured that once it was over, his body would be stronger and more resilient than that of a veteran warrior. She asked really and chuckled, saying that then how come he was so sensitive when she hit him. Arthur shrieked because he was being mocked. He said that he still felt pain, she knew. Virion said that it seemed like 3 years of fusion had not been enough to sap away his energy. Was he ready? Good. After today he would be a true beast tamer, unlike those lucky adventurers who merely used their beast will like a tool. Virion gathered some kind of magical energy in his hand and tapped that energy onto Arthur's chest. He said he was going to ignite his body mana core by inserting a large amount of his own mana. Arthur would feel a bit warm, but it should not be too bad. Arthur felt something heavy pressing against his body and there was a boom of lightning that entered him. The energy thrust threw him away. Elderly Virion and Tessia were stunned observing the whole scenario. Virion asked what in the world. Tessia called him and asked if he was okay. He was lying far away. Arthur told them he was fine. He thought. Virion said he knew Arthur had his reasons for not telling him until now, but he had to ask one more time. What sort of beast had given its will to him? Arthur replied that she was a dragon. Arthur was stunned and he was reassured by Virion saying dragon, dear lord, a real dragon tamer. He had trained an actual dragon. Arthur was on the bed when Virion got there to ask how he was feeling. Arthur said he thought he should be asking him that. The last thing he remembered before falling unconscious was going crazy. Elderly Virion coughed and said that he had calmed down. Arthur asked if he could trust these guys to keep it a secret even after he left. Of course, and on the topic of leaving, the date of his departure had just been set for 4 months from now. Listening to this, Arthur moved the blanket away and asked in an awful tone whether he was serious. He had thought it would not be for another 2 years. Elderly Virion said that an interracial tournament among the 3 kingdoms' youths that had been in the works had finally been confirmed. The portals in Cyrus city of Sapin would be open to both Eleanor Kingdom and the Kingdom of Darv during that time. He got excited and in the very next moment he asked whether that was why Tessia was not here, so that he could be told this. Elderly Virion asked him not to worry about Tessia. He knew Arthur had been checking in on them these past few years through Rinya, but he would finally be able to see them in person. Arthur said in a disappointed manner that still, 4 months was pretty soon. King Virion rubbed his head and said that he would make him wish those 4 months were over soon, brat. Now that he had finished his assimilation, his training would get even harder. He asked Arthur to get some rest. He would break it to Tessia gently. Arthur was worried that 4 months was only so little time. An oval-shaped object dropped onto the floor and it cracked. He got worried when he saw Sylvia's stone fall, and he was confused about how it broke off. Unfortunately, a crack had formed across its surface. From within the crack, something shone faintly, catching his attention. He stared in disbelief as he realized that Sylvia's stone was actually an egg. From the split shell, a small dragon with a tiny tail slowly emerged, its eyes blinking open to the world for the first time. Arthur looked at the creature with warmth and wonder, his gaze soft as he asked, in a mix of awe and affection, if it was truly a dragon. With gentle hands, he patted the small dragon lovingly. In an unexpected reaction, the creature lunged and bit Arthur on the arm. He shrieked in pain as a bruise began to form where the dragon's small teeth had sunk in. The little dragon, meanwhile, was under the impression that Arthur was its mother. Arthur, bewildered by the surreal events unfolding before him, tried to make sense of the situation. After a short while, he discovered that the dragon could speak to him inside his mind. Processing this revelation, Arthur responded that since he was a boy, he should at least be referred to as Papa. Thinking aloud, he mused that perhaps he would name the dragon Sylvie, after his mother. The little dragon seemed to like the name, and Arthur felt it clearly, a rush of emotion and connection flowing from the creature to him. Surprised by the bond, he asked in amazement if the dragon really liked the name, and he could feel the affirmative answer echoing through his mind. As he examined the bite mark again, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than a simple wound. It radiated a strange energy, something that felt like a deep connection between him and Sylvie. At only 8 years old, Arthur now had what looked like a tattoo and had become, in a strange and magical way, a father. He thought to himself that he really was a rebel. That night, he fell asleep beside the little dragon. In the middle of the night, he jolted awake in fear and called out, asking who was there. He saw Tessia standing nearby, holding the little dragon in her arms, her face a mixture of curiosity and surprise. She asked who the creature was, and the little dragon whimpered in distress, crying for Papa to help. Tessia, taken aback, remarked on how cute the dragon was. Embarrassed, Arthur quickly pulled the blanket over his body to cover himself. The next morning, Tessia approached him and asked if he could really communicate with Sylvie through his mind. She commented that he was lucky. Perhaps, she suggested, if Sylvie could communicate with her too, the dragon might like her. Arthur replied that Sylvie probably would like her if she stopped staring at her like she was some kind of predator. Teshia turned toward the elderly Virion and called him over, telling him to come see Arthur's new pet. Virion approached with a doubtful look in his eyes, his gaze settling on the dragon with suspicion. As if on cue, the little dragon leapt up and landed on Arthur's head. Virion grumbled, calling Arthur a brat and muttering that if he kept getting shocked like this, he was going to die young. After Arthur explained everything to Virion, detailing how the egg had cracked and Sylvie had emerged, Virion shared that dragons like Sylvie typically hatched in the presence of their kin. While Teshia and Virion moved on to a sparring session nearby, Arthur sat and watched, his mind occupied with thoughts. They all tried to piece together why Sylvie had hatched in front of Arthur of all people. The only explanation that made sense was that he had fully activated Sylvia's will the previous day, something that might have triggered the hatching. Arthur then asked Virion if he thought he would need to hide Sylvie once he returned to the outside world. Since most people would not know how powerful she truly was, perhaps he could just pass her off as a rare mana beast. King Virion agreed, saying that Arthur should be fine if he played it off that way. He placed a hand firmly on Arthur's shoulder and added that there were more pressing matters at hand. During the assimilation process, they had deliberately held back on strengthening Arthur's mana core. Now that he had fully awakened, it was time to start training both his core and the newly emerged dragon will. Arthur asked what he needed to do next. Virion grinned and explained that in his experience, the best way to access the first stage of a beast will, while also enhancing one's mana core, was through constant combat. Arthur chuckled at the advice and admitted that it made sense. Virion then proposed that it would also make sense for him to fight another beast tamer, someone who could use these will stages against him, as that would help him progress even more quickly. As if summoned by the conversation itself, the roar of a beast echoed nearby. Virion turned to Arthur and suggested they let the battle begin. Beast tamers, mages capable of harnessing the unique abilities inherited from a mana beast, possess powers beyond ordinary comprehension. The first stage, known as the acquire phase, is when a beast tamer can borrow their beast's inherent strengths, but it is only at the second stage, the integrate phase, that a mage can truly utilize the beast's unique abilities and characteristics. For Virion, who had only unlocked this second stage after decades of studying his beast will, the time had finally come when he could wield the deadly prowess of a shadow panther. Now Arthur, pay attention while he sneaks up behind you, Arthur thought, his mood clouded by irritation, wondering if Virion was seriously claiming he could sneak up on him even after announcing it. The demon-like figure swirled with such speed that he vanished within the blink of an eye, only to reappear a heartbeat later as he tapped Arthur on the shoulder from behind. Arthur spun around quickly but was still a moment too slow to react. Gulping nervously, Arthur admitted defeat, saying he surrendered, unable to even register Virion's speed at his current level, and frankly, that form was nothing short of trauma-inducing. Virion calmly replied that he had been told that before. It was not without its flaws, however, as using the integrate phase still drained him to a degree. Arthur acknowledged that while Virion's movements were astonishing, what truly unnerved him was how even when standing right behind him, he could not feel his presence. Drawing his sword, Virion explained that shadow panthers instinctively manipulate wind and sound, creating the illusion of vanishing altogether. After a brief pause, Virion declared that he believed he had bullied Arthur enough and extended his sword toward him, asking with a faint smile if it was time they began training in earnest. Days began to pass swiftly for Arthur, who found himself completely immersed in rigorous training. Under Virion's watchful guidance and through his own growing insights, Arthur succeeded in accessing the first stage of his dragon's will. Meditation sessions with Teshia became a regular part of his routine, grounding his spirit and honing his control. Virion also taught Arthur how to suppress the presence of his beast will in front of other mages, an essential skill for maintaining the element of surprise. When not strengthening his mana core or delving into the mysteries of Sylvia's dragon will, Arthur could be found sparring against Virion, each duel pushing him to the limits of his endurance. Fortunately, the assimilation process his body had undergone allowed him to keep up with the intense physical and magical conditioning without collapse. In his rare moments of respite, he embraced the simple joys and innocence of childhood, honoring Sylvia's wish that he not grow up too fast. Eventually, the day of his departure arrived. Tessie, overwhelmed with emotion, struggled to keep her composure. Having spent every day together over the past few years, it was heartbreaking for her to face the reality of his imminent journey. Just as he expected, Grandma Sylvia's feather worked brilliantly at concealing Sylvie's mark. As Arthur stood there, Virion gently tapped his shoulder. Little Tessia, emotional and unwilling to say goodbye, had been hiding behind her grandfather. Virion told Arthur that it was time to go. Tessia whispered that his carriage was waiting. Handing over a small medal adorned with the Aerolith house crest, Virion explained that it would help him navigate through the forest. Arthur gave his thanks to his grandpa, only for Virion to remark with mock sarcasm that Arthur could always find another princess to lead him back should he get lost. Already on the verge of tears, Tessie reached out and tugged her grandfather's beard in frustration. Virion winced, rubbing his chin and reminding her that it was only a joke, just a harmless joke. Arthur looked at Tessia and promised that they would meet again soon. With Gramps as her teacher, he expected her to be stronger than him the next time they crossed paths. They hugged tightly, a silent farewell passing between them. Arthur whispered that he was going to miss her and urged her to stay safe. Tessia broke into sobs, unable to contain her feelings, and confessed through her tears that she was going to miss him too, calling him Art with a soft voice. Arthur said his goodbyes and turned toward the waiting carriage. As he climbed aboard, a familiar voice greeted him with mocking disdain. A boy sneered and said, "Well, look who it is, if it is not Arthur the human brat," asking if he had finally been kicked out of the kingdom. Arthur squinted and asked who he was. The boy, clearly agitated, snapped that he was the noble Arthur had humiliated by defying the customs of their duel. According to him, everyone but a foolish human like Arthur knew that a true duel was meant to be a demonstration of magic where the challenger always struck first. Arthur chuckled, recalling the name and guessing, "Ivysaur, right?" The boy screeched in protest, correcting him that he was Ferithufsar Hit-Eye, heir to the noble Ivysaur family. He admitted he may have been defeated unfairly when he was a naive child, but challenged Arthur with the implication that things would be different now. Yet instead of escalating the tension, Arthur offered his hand and they shook. Arthur smiled and said it was nice to see him again and apologized for bullying him back then. Another voice chimed in, suggesting Arthur could call Ferith by the nickname Fafi, as everyone else did. Ferith immediately exploded with anger, demanding that they not say that in front of Arthur. Eventually they all settled in for the journey, taking time to rest together. The carriage carrier then announced that they had arrived. Arthur leaned out of the carriage window to catch his first glimpse of the destination. They were finally here. This was the place his mother and father had spoken of with such pride and excitement. This was the legendary floating city of Cyrus. Everyone in the bustling market was chattering, their voices blending into a symphony of daily life as the carriage came to a halt in front of the building. Arthur stepped down and took a deep breath before climbing the worn stone stairs. He knocked on the door with a quiet confidence, yet inside his heart pounded louder than any battlefield. He called out softly, announcing that they were finally home, asking if Sylvie was ready. The weight of what he had endured pressed on him. He had nearly died, he had lost someone irreplaceable, he had taken lives and trained harder than most would believe, yet none of those things rattled his nerves as much as this very moment. From within the house, a little girl's voice rang out, saying she was coming. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman who peered up at him with kind curiosity and asked if she could help him. Arthur bowed respectfully and introduced himself, his voice steady as he said his name was Arthur Leywin and that he had been informed his family was currently residing in this manor. The name struck a chord inside, and from the side, a small girl peeked around and asked who Leywin was. Just then Alice emerged, balancing a food bowl in her hands, and answered that it was Eleanor Leywin, right there, and reminded her of what she had said about greeting anyone who knocked on their door. But upon recognizing the face before her, she froze in disbelief. The bowl slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Her voice trembled as she repeated the name Eleanor Leywin, his sister. Arthur tried to speak but emotion overtook him. Wait, before that. Tears welled in his eyes and spilled down his cheeks, warm and unrestrained. He smiled through the blur and greeted his mother, telling her that he was home. Alice rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him, pulling him close in a tight embrace as she too began to weep, saying that she had known that voice was truly his. Yes, he was back now. Her baby was finally home. Little Leaner started sobbing as well, asking their mother not to cry. A voice called from within the house, growing closer, more frantic, until Ray rushed inside, shouting that it was his son, Arthur, his son. He threw his arms around Arthur, tears streaking his cheeks as he held him tightly. Together, the three of them sat on the couch, a fragile peace settling in. Alice, brushing her eyes, asked how he was feeling and if his voice was all right. He had told them before about an illness. Was it fully treated now? She fretted over how thin he looked and whether he had been eating 3 meals a day. Arthur reassured her gently, telling her he was fine and that he had never been better. Ree chuckled and told his wife she was asking too many questions at once. Besides, with just one look she could see how big and strong their son had become. That was right. Alice then turned to Eleanor and called her over, asking her to come say hi to her elder brother. The little girl stood frozen for a moment, wide-eyed, then tumbled down from the couch and blinked in astonishment. Big brother. Alice smiled and said that this was the same brother from the stories Mommy and Daddy told her before bedtime. Eleanor ran forward and greeted him in a soft, loving tone. Arthur crouched and greeted her back, saying that it was nice to finally meet his sister. After they had all calmed down, Arthur began to explain everything from the beginning. Though he trusted them deeply, he chose to leave out any mention of Sylvia, instead describing his survival from the cliff fall as a miraculous combination of luck and his body instinctively using magic to protect him. He continued by telling them about how he found Tessia and spent time in the kingdom of Eleanor recovering. Ree leaned in and asked about his little companion. Arthur explained that while he was traveling, he stumbled upon a mana-beast den where Sylvie's mother was dying from a grave injury. He had not been able to save the mother, but he had taken care of Sylvie since that day. Alice, still concerned, asked if he was sure that he was completely healed now and if there was any chance the illness might return. Arthur reassured her again, saying she did not need to worry anymore, that it had mostly been due to the instability of his mana core caused by awakening too early. He admitted he felt guilty for keeping secrets from them, but until he became stronger, it was too dangerous for them to know everything. Ray clenched his fist with pride and asked about his mana core. What stage was he at now? Alice scolded him gently, saying that their son had just come home and he was already grilling him about mana core stages. Ray protested that there was nothing wrong with comparing growth, especially since he had been working as the instructor for the Helsty auction house guards ever since they had settled here. Arthur smirked and asked if it was only his father's facial hair that had grown. What stage was Ray at now? Ray laughed and said that this old man had broken through 2 years ago and entered the dark orange stage. He thought it was obvious he had bulked up, but now to think his son had already broken through into the next stage. Arthur nodded and said he must have worked really hard. Ray leaned in and asked, impressed, what about him? What stage had Arthur reached? Arthur replied that he was light red now. Ray froze, repeating the words, light red. He muttered a curse in disbelief before catching himself. Alice, startled, told him that it was amazing, but also reminded him about what she had said regarding cursing in front of Ellie. Ray quickly turned to his daughter and told her not to say that word. Then he turned back to Arthur and asked again if he was really at light red. When did it happen? How? Actually, never mind. They were going to the backyard to spar right now. Alice and Arthur laughed at the sudden challenge. Arthur replied that it was good to be back. A man rushed into the house, breathless, his voice rising as he called out Ray's name and asked if it was true that his son was alive. He adjusted his glasses hastily, trying to process the scene before him, asking aloud what in the world was going on. With him were a woman and a girl who seemed about Arthur's age. Arthur looked at them and immediately understood that these were the people who had been taking care of his family in his absence. Ree smiled warmly and welcomed them, addressing the man and woman by name. Vincent, Tabitha, he said he wanted them to meet his son Arthur. He really was back. Vincent nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on Arthur, and said that he could see that. Ray then turned to Arthur and explained that this was Vincent Helsty, the man who ran the Helstia auction house and an old friend whom he now worked for. This was his house, and before they started wrecking it, Arthur should introduce himself. Arthur bowed politely, his voice steady as he said it was a pleasure to meet them both, addressing them as Mr. and Mrs. Helsty. He added that he understood this might come as a surprise, but he had asked them not to tell anyone about his survival, and for that, he sincerely apologized for the confusion. Vincent chuckled and remarked if Arthur was really sure he was related to Ray. Arthur smiled and said he got asked that a lot, but yes, he was. Miss Helsty welcomed him warmly, saying it was great to have him in their home. She introduced the girl beside her as Lilia, noting that she was about his age and hoped the two of them would become friends. Arthur and Lilia greeted each other, and she was instantly fascinated by Sylvie, asking if she could touch his pet. Vincent, shifting focus, asked about the earlier comment on wrecking his house. Ray responded that it was true. Arthur and he had been just about to go to the backyard for some sparring. Vincent raised an eyebrow and asked with surprise if they were seriously going to spar. Both women exchanged glances and said a few words quietly as Ray and Arthur took their positions facing each other in the yard. Meanwhile, Lily and Eleanor ran around chasing Sylvie, laughing as they tried to keep up with the nimble mana beast. Vincent turned to Alice with disbelief, questioning whether Ray could possibly be serious about Arthur being a light red core mage. Mrs. Helsty asked her husband to calm down and sit. Alice admitted she had been surprised too, but Arthur had always been a fast learner, and he had no reason to lie about something like this. Vincent shook his head and said that he was just supposed to believe that an 8-year-old had not only awakened but progressed through 3 stages already. Even the arrogant geniuses accepted into Cirrus Academy, most of whom were 11 or 12, were only at the dark red stage. Arthur, overhearing that perhaps it was better not to tell Mr. Helsty that he had already reached light red, especially since he had not even been able to train his core properly while it was assimilating with Sylvie's beast will. Ray looked over and said once more that he hoped Arthur was ready. His father was no longer the same man he used to be. Arthur clenched his fist and replied that neither was he. The spar began swiftly, both attacking and defending in a blur of motion. Ray grinned and told him he was going to have to try harder than that. Arthur stepped in, grabbed his father's shirt, and used his momentum to push him forward, tapping him down cleanly. He asked what his father thought of that. Ray admitted it wasn't bad, that Arthur had caught him off guard, but now it was time for his old man to get serious. As his mana flared, Ray gathered fire magic in his hands and said it was a little trick he had learned after breaking through into the dark orange stage. He warned Arthur not to say he hadn't been warned. In this world, from the moment they awakened, mages had elemental affinities, strengths that determined what kind of magic they would be able to control best. Parents often sought out expensive professional testing to determine their child's affinity early on, so they could guide their development along the right path. Conjurers had a natural advantage in being able to manifest and manipulate the element of their affinity, while for augmenters, the presence of elemental affinity was more subtle, and true manifestation typically came only after they reached a certain threshold. For Rei, who had fought and trained since he was young but had never received formal instruction, it had taken until he reached the orange core stage to turn his raw, explosive mana leakage into tangible fire magic. In the world Arthur had come from, elements weren't destined from birth but were chosen by the path a person took, guided by talent and effort. No one was confined to a single affinity, and hard work played just as much of a role as natural ability. For Arthur, who had been blessed with many advantages since arriving in this world, all of that preparation had led to this moment. He had learned a few tricks of his own. Energy gathered around him, resonating with purpose and strength, and he cautioned everyone not to be too surprised. As they sparred, it became clear to all watching that Rei's punches had grown sharper, and he was leveraging his longer reach with precision, keeping Arthur at a distance. The match intensified, their mana clashing in waves of force and fire. Both Arthur and Rei gathered energy to their fullest, their bodies surrounded by an invisible force as the tension in the air thickened. Vincent was shocked to see Arthur's deviant for the first time, the sheer intensity of it catching him off guard, and the others around them stood in awe, equally amazed by the manifestation. It was indeed a deviant, clear and unmistakable. Without hesitation, Arthur launched a sudden attack on Rei, who immediately placed a defense in anticipation. Both of them now had to reveal the extent of their energy, no longer able to hold back as they engaged each other with calculated aggression. They tried hard to block each other's attacks, matching blow for blow, push for push, the clash growing more intense with every second. As expected of his father, Arthur noticed Rei's punches were getting sharper, more precise, and Rei was cleverly leveraging his longer reach, keeping Arthur from getting too close, frustrating his attempts to land a clean hit. With a sudden movement, Arthur managed to entangle his leg around Rei's, disrupting his balance, and then delivered a powerful punch straight to Rei's chin with such force that Alice, who had been watching carefully, gasped in shock at the impact. In the next instant, Rei recovered and locked Arthur in a grapple, holding him firmly, and with a proud smile, he said that it was quite a trick he had learned. Lightning had proven to be Arthur's most successful deviant affinity so far, sparking and crackling with energy around him, but he knew deep down he still had a long way to go. His attempts with ice were still unstable and unreliable, prone to shattering or dispersing before forming fully, and he hadn't yet even managed to unlock the affinities of sound or gravity, both of which remained out of reach. In the midst of the fight, a memory flashed across Arthur's mind, a punch from Virion that had landed on his cheek with such force it left a lasting impression, both physically and mentally, but despite the pain, he had to admit it felt good to finally have something worth bragging about to his parents. Rei, still holding Arthur, asked him when he had learned that move, how he had learned it, and what else he knew, his tone a mixture of curiosity and astonishment. Arthur replied that it hadn't been long since he discovered it, and that he could barely control it even now, admitting he couldn't do much else with it yet. At that moment, Ellie ran toward her father, worry evident on her face as she asked if he was okay, while Alice rushed behind her, calling out that she shouldn't run and should be careful. Vincent, overwhelmed by the unfolding events, suddenly felt dizzy and muttered that he needed a drink, still trying to process what he had just witnessed. His wife, watching Arthur with admiration and disbelief, remarked quietly that he was truly an extraordinary child. Meanwhile, the servants arrived at the scene, holding buckets of water in their hands, quickly working to put out the small fires that had started around the area due to the intense exchange of energy between Arthur and Rei, their faces focused and alert as they tried to contain the aftermath of the explosive confrontation. Vincent called Rei while taking a sip from a beautifully carved wooden glass, his voice calm yet edged with curiosity as he asked whether Rei realized what kind of future his son had. Rei, resting a hand gently on Arthur's head, responded with quiet certainty that of course he did, that he had known ever since Arthur awakened when he was just 3 years old. Vincent's wife, startled by the revelation, turned in shock and asked for confirmation, her voice rising as she repeated the words in disbelief, "Awakened at 3. Alice, chuckling, interjected that Arthur had blown up most of their house in the process. Rei laughed at the memory and said those were good times. Ellie, watching closely, asked with concern whether Papa was okay. Vincent, confused and perhaps overwhelmed, held his head for a moment, coughed lightly, and turned to Rei with a question that hovered with both hesitance and hope, asking what if they enrolled Arthur in Sarah's academy. Just then, Ellie leaned in and placed a spoonful of food into her father's mouth. Arthur, hearing the name, thought to himself with curiosity, Shura's academy, and found himself unsure about what was being discussed. Rei reacted with a tone of disbelief, questioning whether Vincent was serious, reminding him that Arthur was only 8 and that Cyrus Academy was the most prestigious magical institution on the continent. Vincent's wife, still watching the exchange, acknowledged that her slightly tipsy husband might actually have a point, addressing both Rei and Alice by name. She pointed out that with Arthur's level of talent, the academy might even be willing to sponsor him, which would relieve them of the burden of tuition fees. Alice responded with a mix of surprise and humility, saying they couldn't possibly let that happen, not after everything Vincent and his family had already done for them. She insisted that having them pay for their son's schooling was too much, and, besides, Arthur was still only 8 years old. She was certain the academy wouldn't even consider someone his age. Vincent, with a confident smile, boasted that he did quite a bit of business with the famed director of Xyrus Academy herself, and that he could speak to her directly. Arthur, pausing with a bite of food halfway to his mouth, raised his voice to politely interrupt, asking if he might say something since this decision would ultimately affect his future. It was dusk by then, and the stars had begun to glitter faintly across the darkening sky. The servants moved efficiently around them, winding down dinner preparations, and the soft clanking of plates added to the ambience of a home settling into evening. Later that night, Arthur slept peacefully with his small dragon Sylvie curled up beside him, her warm breath a gentle presence as the night deepened. Alice looked on, her voice tinged with emotion, admitting she still couldn't believe he was here with them, grown into such a handsome young boy. Arthur, hearing her, smiled faintly and said he had changed a lot since they had last seen him, hadn't he? Ray responded with a father's steady warmth, saying that no matter how much Arthur had changed, he was still their son. Even after learning that Arthur was a deviant mage with the potential to become one of the strongest mages in the future, that astonishing fact was still only the second best news of the day. Alice agreed with Ray, adding that he was right, although now Arthur was probably too grown up to receive a goodnight kiss from his old mother. Arthur sighed gently and leaned forward to kiss her on the cheek, then turned to Ray and said goodnight to them both, telling them how much he had missed them. Ray nudged Alice and said they should let Arthur get some rest, while Alice, pausing at the door, mentioned almost forgetting to tell him that they planned to go shopping with his sister tomorrow. She explained that he needed new clothes and that it would be a good opportunity for the two of them to bond. Arthur responded with genuine enthusiasm, saying that it sounded good. Ray, before leaving, reminded Arthur not to hold Vincent's earlier excitement against him, saying that he meant well. Arthur nodded and replied respectfully that since he had only just reunited with his family today, he hoped to spend some time with them before making a decision about leaving again to attend the academy. Vincent, a little chastened, agreed and admitted that Arthur was right, that he had gotten a bit ahead of himself. Arthur rose from the dining table and, feeling the fatigue from earlier activities set in, announced that he seemed to be more tired from the sparring than he had expected and politely excused himself. As he walked down the hallway, he heard a girl's voice behind him. Vincent's daughter called out that if he headed in that direction, he would end up in one of their cellars. Arthur stopped momentarily astonished, and turned as she laughed and beckoned him to follow her, saying she knew a better place. She led him into a warmly lit lobby and entered with a cheerful greeting, calling out to everyone and hoping they wouldn't mind a guest today. An older woman looked up and, with a wry smile, remarked that if it wasn't the boy who had burned half of the lawn she had worked so hard to maintain. Arthur chuckled and offered his apologies for the trouble he had caused. A man sipping tea reassured him not to mind the older lady, saying she was just teasing. Arthur thought to himself that she had seemed rather quiet before, but now he guessed this was her true personality. The old lady handed a fork and knife to the girl, who then asked if they had any duck meat left, specifically the fatty parts. The old lady, while serving food, cautioned her to be careful, calling her Lilia, and mentioned that Madame Helstay had grown suspicious because she had been gaining weight recently. Lilia took a bite and replied with mock indignation, telling Maria that she had already warned her not to talk about that and reminded her that she was a healthy growing girl. Laughter rippled around the room at her spirited response. One of the maids leaned toward Arthur and whispered that Lady Lilia often sneaked down here when she was feeling stressed. Arthur turned the thought over in his mind, wondering what exactly she was stressed about. Lilia, catching a hint of the conversation, declared that for that comment, she demanded Maria save her a serving of pork belly next time. A male servant added that the greatest wish of Sir and Madame Helstey was for their daughter to awaken as a mage, even though neither of them was one themselves. Lilia, he said, certainly wanted to be a mage as well, but it was a tremendous amount of pressure for such a young girl. Arthur replied thoughtfully that she need not worry, because he could tell the Helstey family were kind people who meant well. As the night wound down, Alice and Ray said goodnight to their son, their voices soft with affection, and the warmth of family filled the quiet spaces of the house. Arthur was still sleeping when Sylvie began licking his face. Slowly waking up, Arthur picked him up in his hands and raised him high, cheerfully announcing that he was up and asking Sylvie if he was excited too. He then wondered how Tesha might be doing. As he brought Sylvie closer, he sniffed him and recoiled at the unpleasant smell, remarking that it seemed he was not the only one in need of a shower today. He dipped Sylvie into a basin of water with the intention of washing him thoroughly, then placed him gently on the bed to dry off. With a chuckle, Arthur told him that it wasn't that bad. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Arthur called out that he was coming and opened it to find little Ellie standing there. Greeting her warmly with a smile, he said, "Well, hello there, Ellie." She looked either exhausted or slightly annoyed as she responded with a soft "Good morning, brother," and informed him that their mama had asked her to wake him up. Arthur acknowledged this with a nod and asked if Ellie could take him down to see their mother. At this, Ellie's mood brightened instantly and she excitedly replied that they would eat breakfast and then go shopping, although her words were slightly slurred due to her young age and inability to pronounce them clearly. She clasped Arthur's hand and hurriedly led him down the stairs. Soon they found themselves in the marketplace, surrounded by the bustling crowd of Cyrus City. The air buzzed with chatter as people negotiated prices and selected items. Arthur was captivated by the sight of the city. Ellie, now holding Sylvie, stayed close as Arthur peered curiously through the window of a nearby building where beautiful, shining stones were displayed in neat rows. Intrigued, he asked what kind of shop this was. Vincent's wife responded, explaining that the small orbs he saw were called beast cores. These magical cores were extracted from mana beasts and used to enhance one's powers, although the effects could vary greatly from core to core. It was, she said, a bit of a gamble to spend hundreds of gold coins on them, but if one were lucky, a core might even contain a beast will. Hundreds of gold, Arthur thought to himself, if not thousands. He considered that he was fine with the beast will he already had, and for that he was grateful. She added that their Helstia auction houses received quite a few beast cores and even infant mana beasts, and Arthur was welcome to take a closer look when the opportunity arose. Arthur thanked her and said that he would appreciate that. At that moment, Lilia tugged at his robe and urged him to follow her. There was a particular place she had been wanting to take him to ever since she saw him. She led him into a hair salon. The stylist was a muscular man with long, meticulously maintained hair that shimmered under the lights. Arthur looked around uncertainly and asked if this was really necessary. Alice, standing nearby, insisted that his hair was atrocious. The hairdresser reassured him confidently, promising to make her son shine like the flawless gem he truly was. Internally, Arthur was screaming in protest. He felt utterly ridiculous. When the styling was done, Alice looked at him with pride and declared that he looked perfect. Little Ellie added that he now looked good enough to be her brother, and Alice chuckled, agreeing that Ellie was right. Arthur finally looked like a civilized man. As they continued walking, Arthur noticed a group of students laughing near a stall. Curious, he asked Lilia who they were. She explained that they were students from Cyrus Academy. Arthur, taken aback, admitted he hadn't realized. Lilia elaborated that wearing that uniform was something of a status symbol around here. Arthur observed them again and said they seemed like jerks to him. Lilia admitted that many of them were, though they were almost treated like royalty in this city. Just then Alice asked what the two were talking about. Lilia casually replied that they were just talking about the school. Suddenly, Sylvie began crawling like a puppy, full of energy and curiosity. Alice watched him fondly and remarked that he was usually so calm and mature. It was refreshing to see him so excited. Miss Vincent chimed in that after the spectacle of the previous night, it was comforting to see him acting more like a normal child. However, the women around him collectively looked disappointed. Later, as Arthur entered another building, a bell above the door rang softly. A stern man behind the counter looked up and asked if he could help him, making it clear that this was no place for children. He asked Arthur to leave while he was still asking nicely, warning him that the item he was looking at was a dangerous weapon. Arthur's eyes were drawn to a beautiful sword. The man chuckled and told him this was not like the toy sword he probably had at home and suggested there was a candy store just outside. Arthur, maintaining his composure, responded as he exited the building, stating that he was well aware of what a sword was and apologized for getting in the way. Just then, a rough hand grabbed his shoulder and a voice demanded to know what kind of house raised such a rude child. Alice immediately interjected, telling the man to get his hand off her son and demanding to know what he thought he was doing. The man identified himself as Agastus and began to explain, but stopped short in shock when he heard the name Helsty. Alice and Ellie were visibly angry while Lilia took the opportunity to mock the man. Madame Helsty arrived and addressed him directly, stating that Agastus was from a branch family of House Ravenport. She asked if they would prefer she revoke his and his family's participation in the Helsty auction house. Realizing the gravity of the situation, they all bowed deeply before Madame Helsty. Agastus begged for forgiveness, claiming he had no idea the child was associated with House Helsty and offered his most sincere apologies. Arthur turned to his family and thanked them for helping him out of that situation. Madame Helsty admitted with a laugh that in truth, she was more afraid of what Arthur might have done to the man. She and Alice shared a laugh over it. Meanwhile, a man wearing a hood observed them from a distance with a suspicious look. Later, they all stepped out of a carriage, arms full of purchased items, and entered the house. Vincent greeted them warmly and commented that they had finally arrived. He called Arthur over, saying there was someone he wanted him to meet. A woman wearing a wide hat turned to face him and greeted him with a kind smile, saying that he must be Arthur. Vincent had told her a great deal about him. She introduced herself as Cynthia Goodsky, the founder and director of Cyrus Academy. Cyrus Academy, an institution revered as the most exalted sanctuary, any aspiring mage fortunate enough to possess both the background and talent required for admission, stood as a beacon of magical excellence. It was a breeding ground for acclaimed scholars, prominent guild members, influential leaders, elite royal guards, and military powerhouses whose reputations echoed throughout the continent. Anyone who had made a lasting impact in the world of magic bore some connection to Cyrus Academy. Such was the reputation it held, a towering monolith of prestige that dwarfed the countless other academies scattered across the land, and at the helm of it all stood the academy's esteemed director Goodsky. Cynthia and Arthur faced each other in silence, their eyes locked. She extended her hand for a handshake and said that it was nice to finally meet him, Arthur Leywin. As her hand moved forward, Arthur hesitated, confusion flickering in his mind as he struggled to recall the proper social etiquette for a situation like this. Should he kiss her hand or simply shake it? After a brief pause, Arthur extended his hand as well and returned the gesture, saying that it was nice to meet her too, Director. Before the moment could settle, his mother Alice arrived and abruptly pushed him down to the ground, forcing him into a bow at the director's feet. Apologizing profusely, Alice said she was deeply sorry for her son's disrespectful behavior, addressing Director Goodsky with clear embarrassment. She explained that he had only just returned home and was unfamiliar with formal customs. Arthur, bent over awkwardly, thought silently that he hoped this would not take long as he had not eaten in hours. Director Goodsky, undisturbed, replied that it was quite all right and that if anyone was being rude, it was her, for arriving at such a late hour. She explained that she could not bring herself to refuse a favor from Vincent. Considering all he had done for Cyrus Academy, Vincent remarked that he was merely supporting the institution he hoped his daughter Lilia would one day attend. Nearby Leah, Ellie, and Mrs. Vincent observed the entire exchange. Lilia seemed visibly disappointed, her gaze lingering on the scene before her. Cynthia Goodsky noted that it was a rare occurrence for her to make a personal house visit to observe a potential student, but Vincent had captured her interest when he insisted that a prodigy of the highest caliber currently resided in his home. With a touch of impatience in her voice, she asked Mrs. Vincent if she would mind leading them to an open space so she could witness a demonstration. Mrs. Vincent agreed without hesitation. However, Arthur, visibly annoyed, asked if he could at least eat dinner first. Alice sharply rebuked him, and Mrs. Vincent quickly motioned to Director Cynthia, saying, "This way, please." Vincent added that they had a well-maintained paved courtyard nearby that would be suitable. Arthur muttered under his breath to Sylvie that it looked like dinner would have to wait. Sylvie gave a small cry in response, loud enough to catch Director Cynthia's attention. She turned to Arthur and asked with interest what a lovely mana beast that was. Was it perhaps his father's contracted beast? Arthur replied that no, Sylvie was his bond. She had hatched only a few months ago. Cynthia found this fascinating. Many nobles, she explained, preferred to purchase mana beasts and form contracts with them, but she had never encountered a mana beast like Sylvie before. Arthur elaborated that Sylvie's mother had been some kind of scaled wolf with small wings. She had been nearly dead, fiercely protecting her egg, when he had stumbled across her nest. He supposed he had gotten lucky. Director Cynthia was clearly amazed by the story. Just then, Vincent announced their arrival at the courtyard. It was a long, open space with lights installed along its perimeter, creating a bright arena under the darkening sky. Director Cynthia stated that now they would see if Vincent's claims had not been exaggerated. He had told her Arthur was an augmenter but had refused to divulge anything further, insisting it would be a surprise. As she looked at Arthur, she noted how calm and collected he appeared. He showed no signs of nervousness or fear. She wondered whether it was confidence or arrogance that gave him such composure. On the other side of the field, Arthur was entertaining entirely different thoughts, wondering what they might have for dinner tonight, and deciding he was in the mood for grilled fish. Vincent, meanwhile, beamed with pride and whispered that she would be blown away once she saw Arthur's fire and lightning magic. He jokingly added that Arthur would not be able to burn down this courtyard like he had last time. He was truly a genius. Director Cynthia then turned to Arthur and asked whether he did not wish to arm himself with a weapon, at the very least. Arthur responded that since she had no intention of using the wand adorning her waistband, he would go barehanded as well. She accepted his answer and asked if they should begin. During his training with Virion, the explosive power of fire and the adaptive counterattacks of water had been the first key techniques from his previous world to manifest as real elements in this one. Following that, his martial techniques rooted in the principles of earth and wind had also taken form. It was a meticulous process of controlling of internal and ambient mana, shaping it with precision to achieve the desired effect. As Arthur stepped forward and pressed his foot against the courtyard floor, power surged from within, channeling through his limbs and into the stone beneath him. A loud crack echoed as the ground split slightly under the force, a visible testament to the strength he now possessed. Vincent, Alice, Ray, Mrs. Vincent, and Lilia all stared in awe, unable to hide their amazement. Ellie and Sylvie, however, were overjoyed, clapping and cheering at the display. Unlike conjurers, augmenters began with foundational steps such as these to generate an elemental attack. Of course, Arthur had a slight advantage due to his past life's knowledge and training. Now, he intended to see how the director of the most prestigious magic academy would respond to what came next. With careful precision, he summoned stones into a swirling vortex around him, then hurled them with focused power and unwavering intent, each projectile infused with the force of a trained warrior and a mage's finesse. The cracked pieces of stone that Arthur hurled at Director Cynthia shattered midair as she calmly conjured a swirling wind barrier around herself. Some fragments even ricocheted back toward Arthur. Unfazed, he gathered a tremendous amount of magical energy and launched himself forward in a flying attack. Yet she remained still. Her magical aura deflected the assault, sending Arthur flying back in a burst of repulsion. As he backflipped midair, Arthur scolded himself silently. Use the wind. Reorient yourself. Suspend the stone. Despite all his training with Virion, he still found it difficult to use earth and wind magic simultaneously. Fire and water came more naturally. Focus. Arthur attacked again, but Cynthia easily defended, her calm demeanor unshaken. The resulting shockwaves kicked up dust, which scattered across the faces of the observing family members. Then, she began casting another spell. Arthur's eyes widened. Already? She's finished preparing another spell. Gritting his teeth, he summoned more mana, quickly forming a counterspell. Conjure wind in the opposite rotation. Deflect the tornadoes. His clothes tore from the sheer force of the magical backlash. Cynthia smiled slightly impressed. Impressive, she said, but you're overconfident in your ability to confront opponents head-on. Still, her tone held a note of genuine admiration. Your magical and combat aptitude is exceptional. She raised her hand once more. Let's make this the final test. Think of it as extra credit, she added, aiming a glowing finger at Arthur. Try to stay conscious. The moment her spell activated, Arthur clasped his hands over his ears, grimacing in pain. Sound magic. She's a deviant. Cynthia smiled knowingly. Marvelous, she murmured. She turned to Ray. He passes, with flying colors. Then to Arthur, with the aptitude you've shown in wind magic, I'm tempted to teach you myself. Ray was stunned. Arthur, since when did you learn to use earth and wind magic too? Director Cynthia raised an eyebrow. Too, she echoed. Vincent stepped in, sounding nervous. He used fire magic just yesterday, and lightning. That's why I brought him to the paved courtyard. He burned my lawn to cinders. Cynthia's eyes widened. So what you're saying is that this little boy can control at least 3 elements, and 1 to its deviant level. Arthur corrected her. 4, actually. I have an elemental affinity for all 4. Silence fell.
Huh?
Ray blinked. Excuse me, are you alright, Madam Director? She composed herself and nodded slowly. Yes, I'm fine. Little Ellie tugged at Alice's sleeve. Mama is brother strong. Cynthia chuckled warmly. Very strong, little one, perhaps the strongest in the future. As the group settled down and the O began to subside, Arthur turned to his family. I'm sorry for hiding this from you. Alice laughed, brushing it off. Please, Art. Just no more secrets. Arthur's chest tightened. He wished he could make that promise, but he knew he couldn't. Later, as they walked through the courtyard's stone passageway, Cynthia suddenly cast a spell around them, enclosing them in a shimmering veil of mana. They won't hear us, she said softly. Well, this spell is active. Please speak your mind. Arthur smiled faintly. She saw right through me. He looked her in the eye. The truth is, I showed you my abilities because you have 2 things I need: power and influence. I want you to keep my family safe until I'm strong enough to do it myself. In return, I'll not only attend your academy, I'll consider you my benefactor. Cynthia tilted her head, amused. Not even the king and queen of Sapin would dare propose such a one-sided deal. Yet you think I'll agree to this from a mere child? Arthur replied calmly. Perhaps. But maybe I'm more aware of this mere child's potential than even the king and queen are, and I trust that you are too. Of course, my end of the deal will have to wait until I officially attend your academy. I see, she murmured. So you've made a promise to someone important to live your life to the fullest. He nodded. And I think enrolling at Cyrus at a more normal age would help with that. Cynthia looked at him in disbelief. Goodness, that's over 3 years from now. What do you plan to do until then? Arthur's smile faded slightly. I haven't told my family yet, but I've decided. I'm going to become an adventurer. Back at the courtyard entrance, Alice and Ray exchanged bewildered glances, still unaware of the decision that would shape Arthur's next chapter. Someone was having an argument inside the room. Lilia and her mother, passing by, heard someone yelling, "No, absolutely not, no way." Vincent turned to Director Cynthia and said it looked like they had started. She replied that it seemed so. Inside, Alice was shouting at Arthur, saying that he had just returned after everyone thought he was dead, and now he was talking about going out again to get himself killed. No, she said, not a chance, not over her dead body. Little Ellie started weeping, tugging on Alice and saying through tears that Mama should not be mad, no mad. Ree gently calmed her, saying that he was not opposing Arthur becoming an adventurer, but that they should at least hear Arthur out. Alice turned to him, asking how he could say that after everything they had gone through to get to this point. He understood, right? Ray placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Arthur stepped forward and said that he was not planning on leaving anytime soon. He was actually looking forward to spending a few months at home with everyone. He knew he had just gotten back, but after spending more than 3 years in the Elf Kingdom, he felt like he had missed so much of Sapin and the rest of Dikathan. He wanted to experience the excitement that he and Dad used to talk about when they were adventurers. As he said this, he gently held his mother's hand. Ray responded that he understood where Arthur was coming from. He truly did. Even he had been itching to explore the adventuring life when he awakened as a teenager. But their mother was right to worry. No matter how strong or prepared Arthur believed he was, the life of an adventurer was dangerous and unpredictable. Sylvie gave him a gentle nudge, prompting an idea. Arthur suggested what if he were to have some sort of guard or supervisor accompany him. Alice, wiping tears from her face, replied that even then, it would not be enough to put her at ease. Ray, however, said that it was not a bad idea, though the question was who would be suitable. Alice snapped, clearly frustrated, and grabbed Ray by the collar, shrieking that she could not believe he was even entertaining the idea. She would not allow him to send their son away for another 3 years. Little Ellie, watching their parents argue, walked up and grabbed Arthur by the collar. Arthur reassured her, saying that he was not going away for 3 years. Everyone began to relax a little and took their seats on the couch. Arthur explained that he was planning on coming back every few months, or even more frequently between missions. Alice asked if he was serious. Arthur nodded. Ellie, still sniffling, came close to him and asked in a barely clear voice whether her brother was already leaving. Arthur, slightly caught off guard, said no, he was staying right there and that she would be seeing a lot of her brother. Alice, though still not giving her full consent, asked him one thing. Why did he want to be an adventurer now? Wouldn't it make more sense to go to school first? Arthur responded that if he went to school now, he would be much younger than the other students. He wanted to fit in and make friends, and that might be harder with such a big age gap. Alice countered that he did not have to go to school now, and suggested instead that he could help out his father. Ray told her it was fine. Their boy would be fine. Arthur thanked his father for the vote of confidence. He said he did not just want to train. He wanted to fight and test the skills he had been learning since arriving in this world, and he wanted to do so in a real, open environment. Alice frowned at Ray, then pulled at his cheek playfully, half scolding him in affection. Still, Arthur had not lied to his mother. Sylvia had told him to enjoy life, to slow down and chew. Meanwhile, a servant was wiping the dust from a corner of the room. Arthur mentioned that he was just happy to enjoy a meal without being rushed off to work. Alice replied that no one was going to steal his food. Lilia then asked if he wasn't going to the auction house later that day to show some new recruits around. Everyone had now gathered around the dining table enjoying their meal. Ray clarified that it was just an excuse to hold a welcoming party afterwards. Vincent, raising an eyebrow, asked if that was where the ridiculous meal expenses were coming from. Lilia lowered her head and said that it was so embarrassing. Arthur, mid-spoonful, asked what everyone had planned for the day. Mrs. Vincent said that she and his mother had to run some errands around town in preparation for an upcoming event at the Helstia auction house. They were taking his sister and Lilia along if they wanted to join. Arthur replied that he thought he would stay behind, but thanked them anyway. Vincent coughed and asked if they had settled on what to do about Arthur. Alice said that they had agreed to let him become an adventurer, but only under certain conditions. Mrs. Vincent leaned forward and asked what those conditions were. Ray raised 3 fingers to symbolize 3 conditions. First, Arthur would wait till after his birthday in 3 months. Second, he would have a guard accompanying him at all times during missions. Third, he would have to visit home at least once every 2 months. Aside from that, Ray said Arthur was smart enough to manage the rest on his own, he thought. Just then, Sylvie tried to snatch a piece of food from Arthur's plate. Vincent asked whether Arthur had anyone in mind for who his guard would be, and whether there was even anyone capable of guarding him. Ellie placed 2 forks on her head and said, "Papa, look, she is Sylvie." Their mother scolded her, saying that was bad manners. Suddenly, Ray had an idea. He said that the Twin Horns would be returning from a dungeon expedition soon. He had received a letter from the Adventurers Guild stating that they would be back in 2 months. They could arrange for one of them to accompany Arthur. Alice, clearly relieved, said that was actually a good idea. Ray grinned and asked his wife if she could try not to look so surprised when he had a good idea. She chuckled softly. Arthur sat back, happy and thoughtful, thinking of the Twin Horns, Jasmine, Durden, Angela, Helen and Adam. He would get to see them all soon. Vincent was busy writing in his notebook, sitting alone in his room and focused on his work when a knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Upon opening it, he found Arthur standing there. Vincent mentioned that Arthur had just missed his father, who was currently at the auction house, but Arthur explained that he was actually there to speak with Vincent about a particular matter and asked if he could come in. Vincent welcomed him inside. Meanwhile, at the auction house, Alice and Mrs. Vincent were browsing through event decorations amidst the chatter of other patrons. Alice questioned if the item were considering would be suitable for the 10-year anniversary event, to which Mrs. Vincent confidently responded that many noble ladies had adored the centerpieces she had crafted. Shocked, Alice asked how anyone had even seen them, and Mrs. Vincent admitted with a laugh that she had taken a few from home and used them to decorate the private viewing rooms. Alice laughed in disbelief, calling it embarrassing since those were just simple decorations she made in her spare time. Lilia, observing the group, noticed Ellie was pouting and poked her gently, asking if she was mad. Ellie answered that she was upset because her brother did not come shopping with her. Lilia responded playfully, suggesting that now that her brother was around, Ellie no longer cared about her. Ellie, flustered, insisted that Lilia was Lilia and her brother was her brother. Lilia, pretending to be emotional, accused Ellie of tossing her aside despite saying she loved her best. Ellie grew teary, prompting Mrs. Vincent to tap Lilia's head gently and scold her for teasing. Lilia admitted she was only joking and pointed out that all Ellie had been thinking about lately was Arthur. Mrs. Vincent remarked that Ellie might not be the only one, playfully suggesting that perhaps Lilia had a little crush on Arthur. Mortified, Lilia began hitting her mother's belly lightly and asked what she was even saying. She quickly insisted that Arthur was just a big weirdo and reminded her mother that she once said kids his age couldn't be mages. She had been patiently waiting to awaken herself, but Arthur was already a mage stronger than many adults. It didn't seem fair. She wanted to be a mage too so she could make everyone proud. Alice assured her that it was natural to feel that way, but she shouldn't compare herself to Arthur. She was special in her own way. Most of the kids at school knew Arthur was different, and that was okay. Lilia asked how he became so strong and whether Alice or Mr. Leywin had trained him, and if so, whether she could be trained as well. Alice admitted that aside from some basic sword training from Ray, they hadn't done much. Mrs. Vincent was surprised, suggesting that there had to be more to the story given Arthur's extraordinary talent. She quickly apologized for prying, but Alice reassured her that it was fine and that she and Ray were grateful for their concern. They were aware that Arthur was keeping things from them. When asked why they hadn't confronted him, Alice explained that they chose to trust him and believed that giving him space until he felt ready to open up was what being a parent meant. She patted Lilia gently as the group moved on. Not far from them, a man in a black hood watched suspiciously. Another camouflaged figure nearby whispered that they should inform Lord Sebastian that the mana-beast was not present today. A mage from Cyrus Academy had been assigned to guard them, making it difficult to follow too closely. However, the boy believed to be the mana-beast's master would be attending the 10-year Helstia Auction House anniversary event. That would be their best opportunity. Back in Vincent's room, Arthur was sipping tea and observing the situation. Vincent couldn't help but feel unnerved, finding it odd that a child could project such a commanding presence, even more so than the King of Sapin. Arthur set his teacup down and thanked Vincent, then explained that the reason for visit was to request help acquiring a few specific items. Vincent asked what those items were, and Arthur answered that he needed a protective cloak with a hood, a sword suitable for his size, and a voice-altering mask. Vincent replied that the cloak wouldn't be an issue, but the mask was another story. Only a sound-deviant artificer could craft such a device, and although he could try, he was already overwhelmed with preparations for the anniversary event. Still, he wondered to himself why he felt so eager to help this boy. Arthur, sensing the weight of the favor, offered compensation, admitting he had no money but had thought of a way to repay him. Vincent dismissed the concern, saying Arthur's father had already done a lot for him and that the training Ray provided to their guards had dramatically reduced theft and conflict at the auction house. Nevertheless, Arthur mentioned that one of the things he wished to do was help his sister awaken as a mage using a method he had recently discovered. While doing so, he could also assist Lilia. Vincent, taken aback, asked for clarification. Arthur acknowledged that neither Vincent nor his wife were mages, but he believed he could help their daughter awaken and eventually attend Cyrus Academy. Something rolled and packed in a sack tumbled across the floor. Arthur was leaning at the edge of the bed, lost in thought. Even after all this time, he could only use it for a few seconds. He sighed deeply, the image of Virion surfacing in his mind. It was Nad to do it again. Outside, a carriage waited for someone in front of the house. Arthur lay on the bed taking a deep breath. Whether it was his past life or this one, he needed strength to protect the people he loved. Somewhere in the rain, someone carried a bag wrapped in cloth, moving steadily forward. As they rushed ahead, the bag fell behind and books scattered across the wet ground. He splashed through the rainwater, his eyes catching sight of an airplane ahead, a long line of people waiting to board. He wore a blindfold, unable to see a single face. Then he saw a body lying on a stretcher motionless, while a rescuer gently pulled a blanket over it. He screamed. A police officer held a pistol enclosed in an evidence bag while his colleague carefully wrote down the details of the scene. It was most likely a crime scene. This time, he would gain strength not for revenge, but to keep those dear to him safe. His face dripped with sweat. Sylvie asked what had happened. Arthur patted him gently and said he was right. It looked like they were back from their errands. Arthur descended the stairs while Sylvie perched comfortably on his shoulder. Alice called out, questioning Arthur about making Lilia a mage. Even as a harmless joke, she felt it was a little insensitive. Miss X. Vincent snapped angrily, asking if this was some kind of prank, thinking Arthur had gone too far. Arthur calmly replied that he would never joke about something like this. He had proposed a deal to Mr. Helstia, and it had been accepted. Vincent lifted Lilia into his arms, confirming that Arthur had said he would show them once everyone was back, so they should head to the living room. The adults settled onto the couch while Lilia and Arthur sat on a rug. Arthur gently tapped both Lilia and Ellie on the shoulders and told them that they were doing well. Now, he wanted them to breathe in a specific way. He explained that mana is most easily sensed during slow, deep breaths taken in precise rhythmic patterns. Hopefully the explanation would be easy for them to follow. The first step, he said, was to breathe in a special way. Lilia asked what he meant by special. Arthur clarified that was not just any breathing and turned to Ellie, saying that she could take it easy. He explained that if she could manage it, she would become strong like her big brother. Ellie asked what he meant by strong, then chuckled and repeated strong like her brother. He hoped she could understand his instructions. Holding their shoulders again, Arthur explained the breathing technique. They were to take a deep breath through their noses until they could inhale no more. Then, when they reached their limit, they had to open their mouths and take in one last breath. Afterward, they were to release their breath in small bursts about 15 times. He praised them and told them to try again with their eyes closed until they saw pretty lights floating in the darkness. Vincent and his wife watched everything closely. Ellie giggled and said she saw pretty lights, but they had disappeared. Arthur explained it was because she had stopped the special breathing. Lilia cried and said she still could not see them. She asked if something was wrong with her. Arthur reassured her, saying it was okay and that he had expected this since neither of her parents were mages. Alice asked if he could at least explain what he was trying to do. Mrs. Vincent added that while she knew he meant well and would not question his magical skill, teaching a child to awaken as a mage was unprecedented and should occur naturally. Arthur responded that he was helping them to do what he had done to awaken at the age of 3, and the only reason he believed he could manage this was because of his affinity with all the elements. He had worked it out in theory, but they would only know for sure after trying. Just watch. He instructed Ellie and Lilia that their bodies might feel warm, but they should keep breathing as he had told them. He then connected his mana and transferred magical energy into them. Lilia suddenly beamed, saying she could see them. Ellie exclaimed how pretty it was. Arthur encouraged them to use their thoughts to try gathering the white specks together. Those little lights were their friends, and they needed to be together to be happy. Could she do that for him, Ellie? Arthur was exhausted and admitted that it was all he could manage for today. Vincent, surprised, asked how it was. Would Lilia be able to become a mage? Arthur replied that it would take a few years, but if he could work with them during the first few months and help them get started, it would be enough. Mrs. Vincent embraced the small boy tightly, her joy overflowing. She said that Lilia should not face any difficulty in becoming a mage. Weeping, she apologized for ever doubting him and thanked him repeatedly. Because of him, her child would now have so many opportunities that had been denied to them simply because they had not been born mages. She thanked him again. Lilia, overjoyed, hugged her father, who also wept tears of happiness. From that point on, Arthur's life settled into a gentle and comforting rhythm. Every morning, he trained diligently and then helped his sister and Lilia progress towards awakening. He struggled tirelessly to awaken their powers. Life became smooth, with moments of joy as they shared light-hearted conversations around the dining table. Even though he remained impatient to become stronger, Arthur never neglected spending time with those around him, knowing deep down that he would not have many chances like this in the future. A ringed notebook lay on the table, its cover boldly titled as Arthur's Notes of This World. Inside, the first page held a carefully hand-drawn map outlining the boundaries of kingdoms and the regions inhabited by their respective dwellers. Mountains, forests, seas, and borders were meticulously illustrated, each labeled with names that hinted at rich histories and long-standing rivalries. The following page detailed the class of conjurers, listing their strengths such as versatile spellcasting and long-range capabilities, as well as their weaknesses like delayed casting and physical vulnerability. Turned again, the next page focused on augmenters, explaining how to identify them by their tendency to fight up close and imbue their bodies with mana. Their strengths included enhanced physical prowess and combat adaptability, while their weaknesses lay in their limited range capabilities and reliance on physical endurance. The stages of core development were illustrated from red to white, yellow, silver, and finally black, each stage representing an evolution in power and mana control. It included notes on how affinity with elements like fire, wind, earth, or water influence both augmenters and conjurers in unique ways. A separate section covered the deviant forms of humans and elves, depicting their transformations with precise illustrations, starting from their initial states and showing the physical and magical changes they underwent. Further pages delved into elemental deviants, describing rare anomalies who manifested unique variations of elemental magic, alongside other types like emitters who expelled magic outward in destructive bursts, diviners who could perceive hidden truths or possible futures, and uncategorized deviants who defied known magical classifications entirely. Another major entry was dedicated to the beast will, focusing particularly on Sylvia and Sylvie. It contained observations on the concept of beast tamers, categorizing them according to the types of beasts they could bond with and the influence such bonds had on both combat and development. Flipping further, the notebook transitioned into a series of pages that captured memories from Arthur's own life, drawn out in vivid pictorial form with accompanying descriptions written in a neat, confident hand. These moments ranged from moments of loss and solitude to glimpses of triumph and warmth. The last image showed Sylvie joyfully riding atop a pumpkin cart, her expression filled with carefree delight, a small but vivid reminder of innocence and happiness amidst all the knowledge and battles he had recorded. 2 months later, Ray and Alice walked nervously through the lobby, their steps quiet but laced with anticipation. Alice remarked that Arthur must be excited to see the twin horns today, noting that it had been a while since their last reunion. Ray responded that he doubted Arthur was the only one feeling that excitement. Meanwhile, Arthur was caught off guard as Sylvie leapt onto his shoulder, surprising him. He chuckled and told her that he was small enough anymore to carry her around like that. Then came a knock at the door. They were here. Arthur opened it and greeted the group warmly, saying hi to everyone. Angela rushed forward and wrapped him in a tight hug, thanking God with trembling emotion. She began to cry, lamenting how much the young boy had been through. As her embrace tightened, Arthur gasped that he couldn't breathe. Jasmine gently pulled her away, apologizing for her lapse in manners and explaining that she had just gotten a little emotional. Arthur's gaze shifted and he was astonished to see Durden, noting how much bigger he had grown. Durden's eyes welled up as he smiled, saying the same back to Arthur. Adam, leaning casually against the doorframe, broke the emotional moment with his usual sarcasm, commenting that he thought the game plan was to put on a happy face for the kid and questioned why everyone was crying. Then he pointed at Sylvie and asked if no one was going to mention the black mana beast looming behind Arthur. The archer among them, skilled with a bow and always calm, rubbed his neck and told Arthur to just ignore the fool, expressing how glad they all were to see him, now grown and even more handsome. Adam defended himself, saying that he guessed he was the bad guy for not crying, and added that it wasn't his fault he was mature enough to keep it together. Jasmine pulled Arthur back into her arms and sobbed, repeatedly whispering that she was sorry. Ray and Alice, standing quietly at the side, wiped their eyes as well. Ray softly said that it looked like they had missed their timing. In another part of the house, Vincent asked if Ray was sure they didn't need conjurers stationed inside. Ray reassured him, explaining that Angela and another wind conjurer were alternating the detection barriers around the auction house, while Durden managed the main entrances. He added that deploying more would look suspicious, like they were preparing for war. Vincent chuckled as he stood in front of a mirror where a maid was brushing dust off his formal attire. He remarked how grateful he was that his old party had agreed to help with security. Ray responded that with the twin horns on board, he was able to reposition the other guards around the adjacent block, prepared to intercept any external threats and ensure the safety of both guests and property. Vincent, still watching his reflection, said that although Ray might be joking, his recent experiences with mages made him take those promises seriously. Hopefully, it would never come to that. Changing the subject, he mentioned that his son had said he wanted a sword before registering as an adventurer. Vincent admitted that given his son's focus on gauntlet-based combat, he hadn't expected a shift to swordsmanship. Ray said that all he had done was get the boy a wooden starter sword. Since the age of 4, the boy had trained entirely on his own. Vincent expressed his surprise and excitement, wondering aloud why anything about Arthur still surprised him. Ray confessed that though Arthur claimed to be self-taught, during the few times they had sparred, there were moments when Arthur emitted an overwhelming pressure, a kind of calm yet sharp aura, like someone who had been through countless battles. Vincent chuckled at the thought and questioned whether Ray was giving too much credit to someone who hadn't even lived a full decade. Ray admitted that maybe he was, but still described those moments when Arthur suddenly tripped or moved awkwardly, as if unfamiliar with his own body. Vincent smirked knowingly and said he thought he understood the reason. When Ray asked what he meant, Vincent replied with a single word: early puberty. Ray, laughing off the theory, suggested they go downstairs since everyone was probably waiting. Mrs. Vincent, already at the bottom of the stairs, asked what had taken them so long and teased that for grown men, they certainly took the longest to get ready. Vincent deflected the jab by complimenting everyone's appearance, though he added that he felt a bit sorry for making everyone adhere strictly to the black and white dress code. As hosts of the event, he didn't want to stand out among the guests, but in hindsight, maybe Rhee's family didn't need to match the formal colors. Alice assured him that it was no problem at all, adding that she would have been uncomfortable wearing the right colors anyway. Meanwhile, Arthur stood to the side, quietly reflecting that dressing up like this only reminded him that no matter what he wore, he was still just some cute kid in everyone's eyes. He wished for his growth spurt to arrive soon. Vincent clapped his hands to gather everyone's attention and announced that if everyone was ready, then it was time to get going. The carriages were waiting outside. Before they left, he turned to Arthur and mentioned hearing that his daughter was making good progress. Arthur confirmed it, saying that if she continued on this path, she would awaken in time to attend Shress Academy at a normal age. Vincent thanked him once more. Ray, keeping his tone practical, said that he was simply holding up his end of the deal and added that he expected to see some impressive things at Vincent's auction house. Vincent smiled and assured him that they would, and with that, he motioned for the group to move out. A beast-drawn carriage made its way steadily toward its destination. Inside one of the carriages, Ray and Vincent sat with their families, sharing the journey together. Everyone was filled with excitement, while Arthur sat quietly beside the horn of the twins. Adam, seated nearby, commented with disbelief that he still couldn't fathom what Arthur had gone through after falling from that cliff. A mage armed with a bow and arrows added that all things considered, Arthur was fortunate to have found a bond, something even seasoned adventurers and nobles rarely achieved. Arthur responded that that was precisely why she was so special to him. Suddenly, the carriage came to a screeching halt. Jasmine, looking out, remarked that it seemed they had arrived. Two doorkeepers promptly opened the carriage doors to welcome them. Arthur stepped down from the carriage and found himself astonished by the sight before him. Towering above was the Helstia auction house, a massive structure with a uniquely grand design. Its exterior was adorned with elegant swords and rare antiques, a testament to the wealth and prestige within. This was the grand 10th anniversary celebration of the Helstia auction house, an event that had stirred excitement among nobles and adventurers alike. It wasn't just a celebration but also a rare opportunity to view and perhaps purchase priceless artifacts long kept hidden and secured specifically for this day. Upon entering through the towering doors, they stepped into an immense building with an impressively wide central passage. The area was already bustling with people. Arthur marveled at the sheer number of glowing beast cores on display. His gaze then drawn to a peculiar idol featuring red eyes and a grinning face with a circular pointed structure rising behind it. He found himself puzzled, thinking what in the world that even was. The exterior had already impressed him, but now the interior did just much, if not more. Vincent gathered everyone's attention and declared that today was a big day. They needed to keep their heads focused and avoid any major mistakes. Ray, ever the commander, instructed Team B to ensure the side corridors were checked every half hour before circling back to their original patrol routes. The team agreed without hesitation. Arthur noted how comforting it was to see everyone like this, especially his father. It was a big change from how he typically behaved. She replied that his father had always been a leader, and while she had grown since taking over his responsibilities, she still felt she could not quite match up to him. With that, she mentioned she would be joining his father now and told Arthur she would catch up with him later. Alice called Arthur to follow, and he replied that he was coming, suggesting they all head inside. Vincent and his father would be joining them shortly. Inside, they entered a vast and beautiful room with high ceilings. At the top stood a man wearing a hat and an apron, and Arthur assumed he must be the auctioneer for the event. Even having lived as a king among the Eleanor royal family, he found the setting impressive. Mrs. Vincent looked stunning and asked Arthur what he thought of their Helstia auction house. Arthur replied that she was seriously downplaying the term house. She smiled and said she was glad he liked it. Lilia added that he should wait until he saw the private viewing rooms above. Alice warned Ellie to be careful as they moved forward. A servant respectfully informed Mrs. Vincent that they had arrived. Observing how grand the surroundings were, Arthur found himself increasingly curious about what items would be presented at the auction. Mrs. Vincent mentioned that they were expecting some very special guests later, but for now, everyone should feel at home. Ellie and Lilia were overjoyed and leapt in excitement. Meanwhile, Mrs. Vincent and Alice stood near a stall, inspecting something of interest. Lilia called out to Ellie, pointing out that it was starting. Ellie looked on in awe at the crowd forming before them. Mrs. Vincent asked what the children were up to, and Lilia explained that Ellie was trying to count everyone entering. Finding it adorable, she suggested Ellie play Pock Pock instead, which was a hand-clapping game. Ellie agreed happily. While sipping a drink, Mrs. Vincent shared something secretive with Alice, who appeared astonished and found it hard to believe. Arthur, sitting slightly apart from the others, observed that everyone seemed to be having a great time. Just then, a servant approached Mrs. Vincent, bowed respectfully, and politely apologized for the interruption before informing her that the VIP guests were about to arrive. She acknowledged his message, and everyone promptly stood in attention. Vincent stepped forward and made the announcement, presenting His Majesty Blaine Glader, Her Majesty Priscilla Glader, Prince Curtis Glader, and Princess Cathaun Glader. As the royal family took their seats, the entire room bowed their heads in solemn respect. Arthur instantly felt the familiar sensation he had once experienced in Eleanor. He was once again in the presence of royalty. King Blaine Glader remarked that he hadn't realized they would be sharing the space with other guests. Vincent humbly apologized for his presumption, explaining that he remembered the king wanting to meet his family again during his last visit, and thought today would be the perfect occasion. He introduced his wife Tabitha and daughter Lilia, both of whom bowed in respect. Then he introduced Alice Leywin, his close friend's wife, along with her children, Arthur and Eleanor Leywin. The king responded warmly, saying that any friends of Vincent were friends of his as well, and asked them to rise, reminding them that they were there to celebrate the Helstia's remarkable 10-year anniversary and enjoy the occasion. The queen added that there was no need to remain so formal and expressed her delight at having company beyond their royal guards. She laughed softly. At that moment, Sylvie appeared from behind a sofa. The princess's eyes lit up with joy as she observed the small creature, remarking on how cute the mana beast was. She noted it looked reptilian but somehow far more intelligent. Arthur explained that Sylvie had only hatched a few months ago and introduced her by name. He gently asked Sylvie to greet the royals. The prince asked if Sylvie was indeed his bond. Arthur confirmed that she was. The prince commented on how fortunate he was. Even infant mana beasts were notoriously difficult to tame, yet Sylvie appeared incredibly well behaved. Arthur clarified that their connection was mental and that it was more of a mutual agreement than a bond of obedience. Suddenly, a man's voice rose with surprise and urgency. The room shifted its attention to him as he asked, seemingly in disbelief, whether Arthur meant that he was in an equal contract with the mana-beast. Arthur wondered if he had said something inappropriate and simply answered that, supposedly, she was the one who initiated the contract. The man bent down, reaching for Arthur's hand, requesting a closer look at the bond. King Blaine intervened, firmly stating that this was neither the time nor the place to study someone's companion, and reminded the man, Sebastian, that he was currently on duty. Sebastian, visibly embarrassed, Lode apologized sincerely to the king. Mrs. Vincent redirected everyone's attention by announcing that the event was about to begin and invited the royal family to their seats. Arthur shot Sebastian a displeased glance. Outside, skitters, classified as D-class mana beasts, stood waiting. These domesticated draft beasts were commonly used to pull carriages across rough terrain due to their exceptionally strong claws. With far greater endurance and strength than standard horses, skitters were considered invaluable assets to those who could afford their services. Laddies and gentlemen, nobles and adventurers, the auctioneer's voice echoed through the grand hall. May I say that it is the highest honor for me to be here tonight. I presume all of you esteemed guests have gathered here today for one reason, and one reason only, to obtain one of the rare and valuable items in this auction. The crowd cheered in unison, excitement pulsing through the room. But before we begin, the auctioneer continued, if everyone in the audience would kindly turn to face the south. All heads turned respectfully. Please join me in welcoming a few exceedingly important figures who have blessed us with their presence. The very king and queen of Sapin. The audience stood up and bowed deeply in respect. And now, the announcer continued, last but certainly not least, the man who made this entire event possible. Please give a big round of applause for Vincent Helsty. Applause filled the hall. Arthur watched from his seat, thoughts drifting. This reminds me of my past life. No, I'm not a king anymore. Hell, I haven't even gone through puberty yet. He took a sip from his glass. Sylvie whisked telepathically, snuck alcohol in when no one was looking, didn't you? Nearby, Lilia scolded Ellie, stay still while eating Ellie. Arthur's gaze drifted to the queen. From between the folds of her dress, he caught a glimpse of a hidden staff. So she's a conjurer, he noted silently. And the fact that I can't sense her mana, either she's using an artifact to suppress it, or she's at a level so high that I can't even detect it. He pondered further, it's strange. I don't feel any attraction to the queen or older women, even though they're the same age range I was before I died. Maybe it's because they're my mother's age. Then again, I don't feel drawn to girls my age either, whatever. Not like I have plans to date anyone anytime soon. I'll think about it when I'm older. Vincent leaned over and nudged him. Sword's up for auction now. Let me know if you want it. I'll place the bid. Don't worry about the price. Perks of owning the place. The auctioneer presented the item. This short sword was forged by a master smith who is also a fire artificer. Embedded above the handle is the core of a mighty thunder hawk. When mana is channeled into it, it produces an electric current along the blade's edge, enhancing its cutting power and even causing a paralyzing effect. The crowd murmured as the bidding started at 50 gold. 51e 50 2-3, Arthur thought, just one gold coin could buy a modest house in Cyrus. And where I come from in Ashbur, a family could live well on a few copper coins a day. Just the starting bid on this sword could support a family for over 250 years. Vincent raised a brow. So like it? I know it's a bit big for you now, but a sword with an elemental ability is hard to come by. Arthur shook his head. Sounds powerful, but it's not something I need. I'd prefer something less flashy. Vincent grinned. Yeah, thought so. Why play with a spark when you can wield lightning itself, right? Anyway, this is just the beginning. Even if you don't find anything, I managed to grab all the other items you wanted. Arthur looked at him curiously. Even the voice-altering mask. Vincent gave a smug look. Who do you think I am? I even got you a coat made from a nightmare fox. It obscures your presence. Perfect for someone like you. Snatched it before anyone else could. Arthur chuckled. That's more than I hoped for. Just stay safe. You know I'll have to deal with your family if something happens to you. Vincent patted his shoulder. Got it. More weapons and several beast cores appeared on stage, ranging from C-class to even A-class. The king himself bid on a few, eventually winning an A-class core. But whether the core contained a beast will would only be known once the recipient absorbed it. Arthur shifted in his seat. When's the intermission? Where did she wander off to? He turned to Lilia. Hey, have you seen Sylvie? She was just here a moment ago. Arthur looked under the table and behind the couches. Sylvie, where are you? A moment later, he caught a glimpse of Sebastian walking toward Sylvie, who sat in the corner. There you are, little girl, Sebastian cooed, reaching to pat her. Arthur tensed. Control yourself. He's the royal family's court mage. We're leaving, Sylvie, Arthur said firmly. But Sebastian suddenly struck the ground with his staff. A countryside commoner like you has no right frolicking around with such a special beast, he said coldly. Arthur narrowed his eyes. What I'm saying? Sebastian said darkly. She will be mine. Arthur's fists clenched in fury. Say that again. A moment ago the auction hall had echoed with cheers and excitement. Vincent, however, couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity that Arthur hadn't found anything he liked. From what he understood, Arthur wasn't looking for anything extravagant. Just a high-quality sword. Vincent thought, if that's all he wants, I'm sure I can find something suitable in our storage. Suddenly, King Glader tapped Vincent's shoulder. Startled, Vincent turned and said politely, "Your Majesty, I hope you're having an enjoyable evening. I'm not sure how you managed to secure an A-class beast core from a silver coat bear," the king replied, "but I'm very pleased with my purchase. Let's just hope the beast was still intact." "I'm glad this humble event has been worth your trouble, Your Majesty," Vincent said, bowing slightly. "The only thing humble here is you, Vincent. This event is nothing short of magnificent," the king replied as he lightly tapped Arthur on the back. Just then, Vincent tried to remove a flower badge from the king's robe, perhaps out of etiquette or instinct. But the king reacted aggressively, throwing Vincent aside with a burst of strength. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Your Majesty," the king's commander shouted, drawing his sword and stepping protectively in front of him. Vincent staggered back, a thin red laceration bleeding across his neck. He gasped, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The queen, composed despite the tension, said firmly, "Don't worry about me. Protect the children." The king drew his own sword. "Who dares attack the royal family? Show yourself!" Prince Curtis shouted, standing beside the commander, both guarding the royals. Meanwhile, Sebastian stood nearby, spitting blood and cursing under his breath. Arthur, shocked, thought, "Crap, I lost control again." He glanced over and saw little Ellie weeping quietly in her mother's lap. Vincent, still clutching his neck, asked weakly, "What just happened?" At that moment, Ray, Adam, and Angela burst into the hall. "Is everything okay here?" Ray asked, scanning the tense room. "We've searched the area. It's secure for now," the commander reported. "Check the upper floors. Upstairs too," Ray asked, already turning. Arthur, filled with guilt, thought again, "I'm sorry, father." Everyone sat quietly on the couches, visibly shaken and disappointed. Then a royal guard entered and bowed, reporting to His Majesty, "An intruder has been apprehended by Captain Leywin just now." "Oh," the king said, mildly surprised. "Then all is well." Arthur, confused, thought, "Wait, what?" Just like he looked around. "Thank you, intruder. Your sacrifice wasn't in vain." He was relieved everyone was safe. The commander scolded, "Sebastian." A royal guard falling on his rear over a little intimidation. Another commander chimed in, "You'll die young like this." "I slipped, that's all," Sebastian grumbled. "Thanks for your service, everyone. Now let's get the show going." The host of the auction stepped forward, beaming. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now present the final item of tonight's event. Tradition dictates the best be saved for last, and I'm not one to ignore tradition." He turned with a flourish. Behold, an infant world lion stepped onto the stage. Gasps erupted from the crowd. For those unaware, an adult world lion can become a powerful B-class mana beast. And if cared for properly, this infant could even reach A-class potential, the host declared. Sebastian frowned. "This bastard isn't even paying attention to the other beasts," the host continued. "Treasure this fine beast, and you may become a legendary beast tamer. The bidding will start at 500 gold. The hall buzzed as the bids rose. 6 and 700, 800. Then, the king stood. 1,000 gold. A hush fell over the crowd. Vincent smiled. "Seems no one wants to bid against the king." "Congratulations, Your Majesty. 1 white gold tablet seems more than fair. May I ask, what are your plans for the new royal pet?" "As tempting as it is to bond with it myself, I'm thinking of giving it to Curtis, assuming he earns it," the king said with a smile. "I'll do my best, father," Curtis replied eagerly. Then, turning to his mother, he added cheekily, "Does this mean I won't have to avoid my tutor anymore?" His mother raised an eyebrow. "I said I wouldn't tell your father." Arthur, watching the exchange, thought, "Seeing them like this, they almost seem like a normal family." As the auction neared its end, Vincent asked, "Would you like me to gather the items and send them over, Your Majesty?" "Nonsense," the king said, "as if I'd have the patience to wait. Will accompany you?" "Of course," Vince said, smiling. "Please follow me." As they prepared to leave, Sebastian leaned in close to the king and whispered something. Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Why do I have a bad feeling about this?" Vincent turned to Arthur. "Come here, Arthur. Everything you asked for is ready, except for a sword. I think it might be best if you take a look yourself and see if anything catches your eye." Alice took the items from him. "I'll hold on to these while you choose." "Thanks, Mom," Arthur said, approached. "The planning on taking sword lessons, young man? My boys just started as well. Maybe you two can have a friendly spar sometime." Sebastian stepped forward, scoffing. "Your Majesty, Prince Curtis would only pick up bad habits from sparring with a commoner." Arthur bowed deeply. "I'm honored, but swords are merely a hobby for me, Your Majesty. I could never hope to reach your son's level." Someone in the crowd called out, "There he is, Vincent." Vincent turned. "Hurry over, the king wants to meet you." The man bowed before the king. "My apologies for the intrusion, Your Majesty." "At ease," the king said. "I hear you're the one who captured the intruder earlier. Seems Vincent's acquired quite the capable hand." "I'm not worthy of such praise," the man replied. I was merely doing my duty. Reynold Leywin at your service, and over there is my son. Is something the matter, your majesty? Ray asked cautiously. The king glanced at Sebastian, then back. Sebastian here has served the royal family loyally for years. For his many contributions to the kingdom, I feel it's only right to reward him. Arthur's pulse quickened. The king continued. It seems he's taken quite a liking to your son's bond. Giving a royal guard such a rare creature would be a service to the kingdom. The king looked at Arthur with a measured expression. It seems Sebastian has taken a fancy to your son's bond, he said. Arthur and Ray both froze, shocked and concerned. Excuse me, your majesty, Ray asked, disbelief coloring his voice. The king extended his hands in a welcoming gesture. Of course, I'd be more than happy to compensate you. We will cover the cost of hiring a mage to sever the contract between your son and the mana beast. Ray immediately stepped forward, kneeling before the king. Your majesty, I must apologize, but neither my wife nor I have any say over our son's bond. He acquired it on his own. We cannot speak on his behalf regarding this matter. Alice, seated beside him, glanced nervously at Arthur. Arthur's eyes shimmered with a faint blue glow as he stared directly at the king. Sebastian narrowed his eyes. Boy, didn't your parents teach you to lower your gaze when speaking to your superiors? The king smiled faintly. Hello, child. I believe you overheard my conversation with your father, so I won't repeat myself. What do you say? Our royal armory certainly holds a sword worthy of an aspiring young knight. Arthur closed his eyes, steadying for a moment himself. Stay calm, he's still the king of Sapin. He bowed politely. Thank you, your majesty, for your gracious offer. But I must refuse. Even the most magnificent sword could never replace Sylvie. Sebastian scowled. How dare you? Enough? The king cut him off with a raised hand. Then he offered again. A trade, then the world lion cub I just purchased, for your bond. From the side, Prince Curtis blinked. Feather, I thought that mana beast was mine. The king didn't even look at him. So what do you say? While your beast does seem unique, reptilian types rarely grow to match the strength of true predator class mana beasts. Arthur raised his head calmly. My apologies, your majesty, for not being clearer. I have no intention of giving, selling, or trading my bond. The king's voice cooled. I have asked you twice, child, twice, for a favor. My patience wears thin. I will ask you kindly one last time. Will you give me your bond? Arthur took a deep breath. Then, your majesty, may I ask you a question as well? The king raised a brow. Speak. How much would you be willing to sell your children for? Gasps rippled through the hall. Arthur continued, his voice unwavering. You have asked me 3 times, and I've refused 3 times. Yet your pride doesn't seem to let you accept that answer. Perhaps you don't fully grasp what it is you're asking me. So let me be clear, how much money would it take for you to part with your son or daughter, King Glader? The room fell into stunned silence. A nearby commander roared, drawing his sword. Insolent peasant. You dare insult the king and his family. Arthur watched as the man surged forward. He's channeling all his mana into his sword. Does he plan to cleave me in two? Keep the mana flow calm and even. He sidestepped the strike with perfect timing. Anticipate the enemy's movement. Take control of the path of his strike. The sword missed, slamming into the floor with a deafening crash, shattering stone. Disrupt his balance and explode with precision, using his own momentum against him. The commander stumbled. Arthur struck, sending him flying back. Watching from the sidelines, Sebastian seethed. Fool. He couldn't even kill a child. He wasted the perfect chance. Determined, Sebastian raised his hand and summoned a powerful spell. Even if I'm punished, I'll handle this myself. The king doesn't understand a bond capable of forming an equals contract at such a young age will eventually grow beyond A class. I must have it. The spell launched forward. But before it could connect, something went wrong. Sebastian's eyes widened. What? It bounced back. Impossible. Arthur stood his ground. Spells fueled by ambient mana won't work on me. Sebastian recoiled. Stay back. You think you're a match for a royal conjurer? Arthur stepped forward. In this state, yes. Suddenly, Arthur twisted his stance and swept Sebastian off his feet. The older man hit the ground with a sickening crack. His leg broke, blood beginning to seep through his robes. Someone help me, Sebastian cried. Why is everyone just standing there? Can anyone hear me? Arthur knelt beside him, his voice low and cold. No one's going to help you, so it's best you listen while you still can. Sebastian trembled. Why? You can't do this. I'm the royal family's personal conjurer. Arthur's gaze hardened. Exactly, know your place.